In a world where God is dying, 4 heathens come to deliver the final nails in the coffin. From the depths of hell, Satan sends 4 puppets of the imperialist West and the Zionist Jews against God, Islam, and tiny kittens to bring you their propaganda and conspire for a new world order. This is Secular Jihadists from the Middle East.
Good evening, everyone, who are watching us from all around the globe and Canada. So I'm your host of Secular Jihadist, and today we have the 3 usual Secular Jihadists: Yasmin, Confession of Ex-Muslim.
That's right. Cheers, everyone. That's me.
Good. The Armin Nabibi.
Hello.
Who is the founder of Atheist Republic, and who recently got banned from Facebook, which we need to talk about during the podcast. I support the ban. As a Trump supporter, I think every Iranian should be banned. But and with us also we have Al Rizvi, the author of The Atheist Muslim.
Hello, everybody. And Faisal, congratulations on the last podcast for coming out straight. That was wonderful.
Thank you.
I just wanted to, and I mean that from the heart of my bottom. I mean, the bottom of my...
The bottom of your bottom.
Right. I mean, guys, me and Faisal go along the back way. I mean, we go back a long way.
We go back long before ISIS was created.
Yeah, we were talking about this yesterday, and they told me to do it on the air. So
yeah, I understand. I completely understand.
Are you guys going to do it on the air?
Oh no! No.
We're going to do it on Muharram. How about that?
Yeah, I know exactly. When it's dark on Ashura.
And yeah, today we have a wonderful guest who actually interviewed us before, Lalo Dagach. Lalo, as far as I know, is a Zionist. He's a Mossad agent. And
I stole your shoes. That was me.
He stole my shoes. And I've been like hating him since then.
So Holocaust survivor as well, I think, right?
I mean, yeah. What is else about Lalo? Lalo identifies as genderqueer. He is non-binary Palestinian, which is not common quite in Gaza. He's from Gaza.
So very, very special man. No, sorry, I didn't mean to say man. I'm sorry.
So Lalo was part of Hamas during the revolution. No, that's not the...
NSA is going to come get him now.
That's not the real introduction. Lalo is the host of the Lalo Dagach show, and he is one of the best people on Twitter. So to give him a shout, he's like, his Twitter is filled with good stuff.
Good tweets.
I actually follow him, and when I don't see things on my feed, I go to his profile to see what he's posting in case I missed something, because he's always entertaining us with new stuff and stuff that probably we never heard of. He has this thing of like cutting videos, which is probably like the Arab thing, like beheading. Like, so you behead videos and you make them like
more like circumcision, isn't it?
Like, it's like a combination of circumcision and beheadings. So he has like these videos of like 60 seconds or 30 seconds in which they mostly go viral. So that is kind of like my knowledge of Lalo. So Lalo, welcome to our show.
Thank you, Faisal. Am I your first Mossad Hamas member on the show?
No, other than my ex-girlfriend, you are the second.
Thank you.
So Lalo, tell us more about yourself.
Well, thank you. So my show is the Lalo Dagach podcast. It's kind of new. It's about 13 episodes in, and my focus is mostly social activists or political activists or refugees and things like that. Sometimes I get into kind of somewhat philosophical debates or social debates. So it's kind of varied, but my focus will be in the future, like people who are political dissidents from all over the world, in not necessarily associated just to Islam or even religion, but people who have escaped Cuba, like I interviewed somebody recently, somebody from Saudi Arabia. So it's all kinds of people. So that's That's what I'm trying to do on my podcast. And I was kind of nervous, like I was wondering if anybody was going to talk to me, but actually now I have too many people to talk to, and it's all self-produced, so I have to kind of pace myself. But it's been fun. I'm kind of surprised you guys wanted to talk to me after being on my podcast, because I tried my best to actually make a controversial discussion. I think it was definitely fun.
Mm-hmm.
Let me tell you the real story. So,
okay.
After the recent attack in Israel, we thought that of like, oh, we should interview someone from Hamas, and like Yasmin suggested Lalo, and we were like, oh, Lalo is the best guy to.
I am not a part of. I just want to make this very clear. I have never been associated to Hamas because this joke is going on way too long.
Yeah, I know.
I'm not part of Hamas.
So Suga is getting away from the Hamas thing, right? Lalo. Allow me to ask the first question. So one thing, you've got an interesting background, right? So you're sometimes in Chile, that's in South America for all the Trump supporters, in case you didn't know. Okay. And sometimes you're in California or in the US, right?
Right. Yes.
But you are originally you have a Palestinian background as well, but you're not just you're not like Palestinian Muslim. You're actually Palestinian Christian background, even though you're an atheist. You're Palestinian Christian background. So my question to you is, where are all the Palestinian Christian suicide bombers? I mean, aren't they being oppressed and shit as well?
Well,
so what's going on with that?
I do want to. So I thank you guys first for giving me the opportunity to kind of talk about my background, because I think it's interesting, but I've always kind of avoided talking about it a little bit because I feel like some people will take it as you're engaging in identity politics if you talk about your identity too much. And I don't like that, right? But I do want to...
No, we're all about identity politics here, all four of us.
Right.
That's the whole basis of this podcast.
But I do want to inform people about there's a huge community of Arabs in Latin America, and it's completely underrated, not known at all. And to give some people some idea about how significant the Arab Latino community is, because I feel like when people say Arab American, everybody's just, oh yeah, that's fine. But Arab Latino is strange, but it's actually not that strange. So, for example, Chile is the most populated country with Palestinians in the world outside the Middle East. And even I think on the list, it's about third, if I'm not mistaken, maybe fourth. I think it's Lebanon, Israel, Syria, and then Chile. But outside the Middle East, it's the most populated one. So in the United States, Palestinians are about 85,000, maybe 90. That's the total Palestinian community. In Chile, there's about 500,000.
Wow.
Right.
Oh, wow.
So more than 5 times as many. And if you go to other parts in Latin America, for example, Lebanese people, there's about 500,000 Lebanese people of like Lebanese background, let's say, in the United States. In Brazil, there is somewhere between 6 to 7 million people of Lebanese background. That's just Brazil. And you'll find them all over. There's Palestinian Lebanese people and Syrian people all over the Latin America. You guys probably
Lalo,
have, yeah?
Do you know if those Lebanese people are Lebanese Christian? Probably.
They probably are, but I'm not totally certain about the Lebanese in Brazil. But when I go more into my background, I can tell you that I don't like to talk in absolutes, but it's pretty much absolute that all the Palestinians, and there's also Syrians and Lebanese also in Chile, not as many as there are Palestinians, but there are. But basically, all the people of Arab background in Chile are practically 100% of Christian background. And these people came from Palestine when it was still under Ottoman control towards the end of the 19th century and the early 20th. Mm-hmm. And they were escaping persecution from the Turks, who were forcing them into the army. And basically, the people who had it first the worst were the non-Turks, such as Palestinians. And you guys, if people have heard probably a lot in the last few years about the Armenian genocide. That was of mainly Christian Armenians, and there was also Muslim Armenians. But these people were basically forced into the armies, and they were just pushed to the front of the lines with no guns and just used to, waste the bullets of the enemy. So my family, for example, came from a part of Palestine called Bejala, and it was a very kind of well-known place for Christian Palestinians. And they came to Latin America and eventually ended up in Chile. And in Chile, there was kind of this boom at the beginning of the 20th century for, there's like salitre mines. Salitre is kind of this nitrate element, but then the Germans made kind of this artificial synthetic nitrate. And then the whole thing kind of took away from this kind of exploding economy from these mines. But at the beginning of the century, it was this kind of boom of these for Chile economically. So it brought a lot of people towards Latin America because it was all kind of new country and there was lots of space for them. So, I mean, I even heard stories of some family members when they first came to Chile, they literally crossed the Andes on donkeys, right, with their stuff and their families. And these were all Christian Palestinians. And also to give you some idea, like Christian Palestinians, like I said, in Chile are about 500,000. Even in the Palestinian territories, there's only about 50,000 Christians. In Israel, there's about 150,000 Christians, but only 80% of them are of Arab background. So these people are like, it's kind of a forgotten history, and that's why people don't really associate Palestinian to Christian anymore. But this was significant numbers of people at some point. And even in the US, the first Lebanese or Palestinians who came to the US came at the beginning of the century, and they were of Christian background escaping the Ottomans. And it was later like the Palestinians of Muslim background more immigrated during the Arab-Israeli war, right, in the mid-century. So this is a little bit more further back from my family history. So this is my great-grandfather, whose name was Yema Dagach, and they were just like fresh off the boat. My father would tell me that my great-grandfather would speak with a very thick Arab accent still. But the Arabs in Chile have mostly integrated. They used to be in this one sector, and that's called Patronato. And Patronato in Chile is kind of this area where they sell a lot of like textiles and things like that, and they will all have their businesses there. But now if you go there, it's mostly Korean and Chinese businesses because they moved in and the Arabs couldn't compete with their prices. So they kind of moved on to kind of other businesses, and mostly the Arab community has done really well. Like they're part of the government, they're all kind of business owners. But there's no kind of Arab areas anymore. They're very integrated in society. I almost never meet a person who's from that background, Arab background, who can speak Arabic or holds any of the traditions. And I think a lot of that has to do with the easy assimilation of the people who actually came from Palestine were Orthodox Christians, and Chile is a mainly Catholic country. So there wasn't a lot of necessary accommodation there, right? It wasn't like too out of place for them. But there was like a process of adjustment for a while. So even in my family, like I've heard stories, like I have an aunt who's basically my father's first cousin, and she was even this is a few decades ago, but she was in a forced marriage. So she kind of lost her parents when she was young, so they wanted to marry her off. They took her to a potential suitor in Palestine. And the suitor's family, I think I heard, took away her passport and kept her there, right? And even my own father, which is something new. I actually, when we were talking about I was going to do this podcast and I was mentioning this story that I was going to bring up, my father actually told me, oh, actually, my family, so my grandfather wanted my father to marry someone in the Camule, which at least in Chile, in the kind of Arab background people, the Camule is people who are all parentesco, so they're like related somehow. So we all have different last names. So I have family who have different last names than me, but they're still like family, right? They're part of the Hamule. They're part of the bigger, larger family. And
is that like a clan or
right? It's
like
kind of like their tribe, right? It's like they come because they would come in these big families. So one would come
like
to
tabule,
Chile,
but yeah,
one would come to Chile with his family, and they would have these houses. And even my father told me like, I have kind of this great uncle who had this huge house that would receive all the new Palestinians coming into Chile, and they will live there a while and then kind of move on. And it was such a big space. That house is now a very important hospital that they built over it. It was such a big property. It's called Hospital Davila. And that was like owned by like a family member of mine named, I think it was Jorge Dagach and stuff like that. But even my father, they wanted him to marry somebody in the family, right? They would try to marry him off. But by then, my grandfather wasn't really, too much into this, the culture of like Arab culture. And so they didn't push on him too much. So he married my mother, who was not Arab. She was just Chilean. And now my parents are, completely westernized. Like they would never try to marry me off or anything like that. And in fact, even my grandfather was a total atheist. He was actually a physicist, and my father is also a physicist. And he moved when he was like, I think like 24, 25 to the United States, to Los Angeles, and studied physics at UCLA. And so he's not religious at all. So I was brought up with no religion whatsoever. But he's always reminded me of our background, because it's kind of an important thing as when you're in a minority in a country to remember this background. But he never, ever inculcated any kind of identity politics. Like we come from Palestine, therefore we hate the Jews and we hate Israel. Like,
I'm against identity politics. As an Iraqi refugee, I'm against identity politics.
Right.
Yeah.
So I never looked at my background as ever trying to define my politics, right? I never heard any kind of hate towards Jews or Palestinians. And I can tell you, like in Chile, if people wonder if Muslims is more a race or a religion, like why Jews and Arabs can't get along, and I keep hearing it's about land and it's not religious, Chile, for example, is an excellent experiment to look to for that. Because you got 500,000 Palestinians who come from Christian background, and there's plenty of Jews also in Chile. And I have never heard of any conflict. I've never heard of any kind of antagonism. I've never been around people who start talking like anti-Semitic things. At best, everyone in kind of my family wishes for the state of Palestine to exist, but never for the destruction of Israel or anything along those lines. So, and even last thing, because Armin wants to ask me a question, but the last thing is there's even kind of an association, a friendly association with Jews. So when I run into somebody and they have kind of an Arab or Jewish sounding last name, I ask them like, oh, what's your background? And they'll say Lebanese or Syrian or Jewish. And we even feel like even with Jewish people, we have this background, which is Middle Eastern. So we're kind of one group in Chile.
Mm.
So what about the Christian Palestinians that are in Palestine? Do they have a lot of anti-Jewish sentiments, or does it exist among Christian Palestinians?
So I've never lived myself in the Middle East or even Palestine or Israel, right? So I can speak more to like Arab Latinos. However, I do have family who has lived in Israel. Mm-hmm. And lived in most of their life there, actually. A few of my cousins have lived there, and some aunts and uncles. And they're all of Christian background. Some of them aren't even religious, but their just background is Christian. Some of them are practicing, but say about half aren't. And it's kind of delicate to talk about that, but even those family members, they suffered a lot of discrimination while in Israel. A lot of harassment, and even I have a cousin who was doing very well.
From Israelis or from who?
So yeah, that's what I was getting at. Like, so even he had a very important like big business there that he was doing well in, and he even felt the harassment was getting so bad he had to leave. But the harassment and the discrimination wasn't from Jews at all. They had no problems with Jewish people whatsoever. They're saying always their interactions were fine. but all the discrimination they faced was from Arab Muslims, and even my aunt told me like at some point she was walking past a Catholic church at some point and to pick up her kids, and a bomb went off right at the doors. And she said that wasn't put there by Israelis. That was put there, and it was a church of Arab Catholics, not they were Arabs. So, but that's the kind of thing that would happen. So she would, my cousins would tell me like, Israel is a really great place to live, even as an Arab or even as a Christian Arab. As far as like economically, people have good houses, people have good jobs, but they still face a lot of threats and danger, and you don't know really what's going to happen as far as like bombs going off and stuff like that. So they had a very hard time, and some of them have moved away and come back to Chile sometimes, kind of come back and forth.
So there are people. I mean, just to kind of follow up a little bit on Armin's question, like there are some Palestinian Christians who have been vocal advocates of Palestinian liberation, like Ed Said, right, who was a good friend of Christopher Hitchens, and he was also a Palestinian Christian. So that movement or that group of people different from? And I think there's also one of the negotiators, the lady, what's the woman's name, the negotiator who works with Saya Barakat. Is it Hanan Ashrawi? I can't remember her name exactly, but I can't remember if she's.
So I can tell you, like, because basically what I live around is diaspora Palestinians, right? And I can tell you, every Palestinian I know wishes for the existence of a Palestinian state.
Right.
But
I just wanted to follow up. So it is Hanan Ashrawi. She's also one of the chief Palestinian negotiators. So she's also an Anglican. So there's some prominent voices. But anyway, continue.
Yeah, no. So I was getting at is that so Christian, or at least Palestinians in diaspora, who at least in where I live, there's no Arab Muslims at all, and I can tell you every single one I know wishes for, like, it is a subject that comes up. Faisal and I, when he was on my podcast, he mentioned that the importance when you're kind of a Palestinian background, the main subject you hear about so much is Israel-Palestine. And everybody wants Palestine to exist as a state. But I would say a difference is I had never, ever heard from anyone that they want the destruction of Israel. They even want usually they want the existence of Israel recognized, as long as Palestine is recognized and all of that. But it never comes along with anti-Semitism, that it's going to burn in a lake of fire, like you'll hear from the Ayatollah in Iran.
This is kind of interesting because some people were like, okay, we want to wipe Israel off the map, which is, I mean, we're not going to talk about those people because that's ridiculous. But then you have people who recognize Israel as a state and they want a two-state solution. I'm talking about Palestinians. So like, okay, we recognize Israel as a separate state. But then there's the next question of, do we recognize Israel as a Jewish state? And then that's where that's where a lot of the issues are, because with Israel, they've, the Palestinians, a lot of them have said that, we recognize Israel as a state. That's why they support the two-state solution. But they've had a really hard time getting to the point of recognizing Israel as a Jewish state. And that is one of the bones of contention in the negotiations. Or like in terms of, where the Israeli government, at least the conservative government that's on right now with the Likud party, they're just like, you have to recognize it as a Jewish state. Otherwise, we're not going to talk to you. Right. So there's that aspect, too. So is there, just in your community, and after this, I'll let it go to the others, too. Is there any talk about that in terms of, whether we recognize Israel as a state, but do we recognize it as a Jewish state as well?
They don't really talk about that too much. I would say one thing I could mention is that from what I understand from reading and family members who have lived there, is that I hear a lot of people say online that Israel is an apartheid state, which kind of throws back to the time when there was apartheid in South Africa with the Black Africans. However, I think there's a major difference there, is that there is never really a talk, from what I understand, and even Arab people who live there, that Jewish Israelis want the Arabs out and want to live separate from them. Like they want them out of their country. They don't want them to have citizenship. They don't want them to have rights. Arabs in Israel have equal rights, and they don't want them gone. They worry about the people who threaten them existentially. And they know, like, Arab Christians are not their problem.
Yeah.
Right. And they don't want them to leave, and they don't want them out. There's no, like, I've never, like, all the people I've talked to, whether it be people who are family members or not, they say to the most part, like, they never have any problems with Jewish people in that sense. They never want them to lose citizenship or anything along those lines. I know there's a lot of people who want Israel to be not just a state safe for Jews, but a Jewish state religiously, like the hardcore religious parties like Likud. But from what I understand, like, they're not the majority, and they can't really win. So, yeah.
Well, they are the most powerful.
They are powerful.
Like, they have significant sway over the ruling party. That's the thing. But go ahead, Armin.
Here's the thing. So my understanding is that when you're saying, like, there's a lot of Arabs and Christian and atheist Arabs in Chile, and they have no anti-Jewish feelings, that suggests that this is not a race issue. And then when you come to Palestine itself, and then you have a lot of Arab Christians there that might have less of an anti-Jewish sentiment, that might suggest that it's not a political thing. The fact that it's mostly a Muslim, not Arab, hatred towards the Jews kind of suggests that this is a religious thing more than a race or a political thing. Is that what you're suggesting?
Shocking.
Well, you know what? Let's forget about the Jews for a second, and let's talk about something else. That to talk about hatred for religion is that when I talk online and it says I'm Chilean Palestinian, I get tons and tons, especially from even well-known writers like Murtaza Hussein and other, like, religious apologists for Islam. Their constant attack to me is that you're a fake Palestinian. Now, to that, if they want to say you're not really Palestinian, you know what? I wouldn't even totally disagree with them. There's some truth in that. If you're not from a country and you're in that country and you speak the language and you're part of the politics, you're not really from there, right? Is a Korean American person really Korean like a person in Korea is Korean? Yeah, maybe not, right? I lived in Korea, and there's actually Koreans don't consider Korean Americans that Korean. So yeah, I agree with you that much. But if you're going to say that to me, you have to say it to Linda Sarsour. You have to say it to Dino Badala, because they are American-born Palestinians, just like me. They also don't speak the language, just like me. But why do they say that to me? Because I'm not a Muslim. And that's why they don't consider me really Palestinian. Not because I'm from Chile, because they're not going to say it to Linda Sarsour. She was born in the United States. So was I. They say it to me because I'm not Muslim. And they don't consider Palestinians who are not Muslim, no matter where they are, they don't consider them real Palestinians. That's the difference. They consider is Linda Sarsour a real Palestinian because she has the hijab on. Doesn't matter if she doesn't speak Arabic. Doesn't matter if she's never been. I don't know if she's ever been, but she's not born there. But they accept her as a Palestinian all the same. She's even a representative.
It's also about what you say. Like, for instance, like, they will accept people like Ed Said, or they'll totally take Hanan Ashawi because they speak their narrative, right? Even though they're
exactly.
Christian,
I mean, that was the comment.
Palestinian.
That was the comment I was just going to make.
Yeah.
And not that I disagree with you, Lalo. I think that for them is that you are not Palestinian because it doesn't fit the narrative of what they think Palestinian to be. I mean, I get the same thing.
It's like Majid Nawaz is not a Muslim because, like, he doesn't speak the same.
And also a main thing, it's also I'm not
basis,
anti-Israel. I'm also not anti-Israel. I'm not anti-Palestine either, but they don't like that I'm not anti-Israel. That's a main contention with them, to the point where they even say I'm a Zionist shill or something like that, even though I've never said anything. Right?
All of us, we're all Zionist shills.
Yeah, I mean, I think that so it's a narrative issue. So, like, for me, when that was before, and now after I come to the United States, in which I like, with my views of being anti-Islamism and anti-conservative Islam and all of that stuff, I was called, "You're not a real Arab."
Wow.
Or no, you're not a real Iraqi, and stuff like that.
Even Faisal with that accent.
Yeah, like,
Faisal is more Arab than Arab. Like, it's just You don't get more Arab than fucking Faisal.
Yeah, and it's because the thing is, like, they have a defined narrative of what this person who's come from that part of the world should be, which is another form of racism, right? It's like another form of racism that removes all any concept of individuality, in which if you are from this part of the world, you have to, I mean, it's really amazing how many times some of my interviews were unpublished. So every time there is the anniversary of the Iraq War and stuff like that, and as probably people know, I hold views that can be considered pro-war. So I am more on the side of Christopher Hitchens on the Iraq War than the liberal side, including today after all of the rise of ISIS and stuff. So every time like there is this, they make these interviews with me about like Iraqi perspective of the Iraq War. I'm like, oh, well, Americans were not that evil. Like the moment you say that, I'm like, either the interview does not get published, or they created just a small cut of me bashing U.S. foreign policy and the management of the war. And then they say, look, this is what the Iraqi says about the Iraq war. They don't say that, for example, like I supported removing Saddam, etc., because it just does, I don't fit to their narrative. So they have the narrative. So what they want me to be is they want me to be the Iraqi who want to bash the Americans, who want to say that screw George W. Bush, screw the U.S. Army, screw Israel, screw all of that. As soon as I don't say that, or I just hint to it in some of my comments, that's what they're going to take. And if I'm going to say anything positive about the U.S. intervention and whatever, you don't fit the narrative, therefore screw you. I think the same thing happens with Palestinians, in which if you are not for wiping out Israel, you don't fit the narrative. How come you're not really angry, Lalo? How come you don't want to burn Jews alive? That's intense. Like, how can you live? So like, it just doesn't make sense to the narrative that they want to push, because you have a counter narrative, right? You have a different idea of how the state should live, etc. So that's actually a very major issue that I think all of us ex-Muslims also face, right? In which you are an ex-Muslim. So what we want you to say is that we want Yasmin to say that the hijab is about feminism, and we want Ali to say that Sharia law is wonderful, and we want Armin to say that Ayatollah Khamenei is a great guy. And if you don't fit to that narrative of what they want us to act like, then we're the devil. We're Uncle Toms, right? We're all Uncle Toms. We're all Zionist shills. We're going to get paid by the Mossad. And the fucking Mossad haven't paid me any shit. Like, I've been, like, I was...
Not a single shoe.
Yeah, like...
we would be so rich.
Since I was 12, I was called a Zionist and a Mossad because I was an atheist, right? And until today, I have not get any fucking check from the Mossad. Like, where the Mossad is listening, please. Like, I've been doing volunteer work for the past 14 years. Like, please. Like, I want to get some money, okay? I want to pay for my rent.
That whole narrative about the first Iraq War has gotten where anybody who just gave any support for the second Iraq War is completely demonized. I've heard people Cenk Uygur said on Twitter that because Christopher Hitchens supported the second Iraq War, he is responsible for more deaths than any Muslim in history. That's something he said. And you'll hear similar things from like Abby Martin and things like that. But why did Hitchens support the second Iraq War against Saddam? Because one of his it was for many reasons if you hear his speeches, but one of the main reasons is because he cared so much about the genocides against the Kurds.
Exactly.
And he always wore the flag of Kurdistan on his lapel, visited there, met with them. And he said he supported the downfall of Saddam decades before, Bush ever came on the scene, because it was in the early 80s that already Saddam was using gases against tons of Kurdish towns.
Yeah, and I just want to say, like, there's a lot of the Christopher Hitchens position is he's one of those guys. He's interesting. Like, I don't personally agree with his defense of the Iraq War, but what I read about it, and he wrote about it in Hitch 22. I think that's one of the places where he wrote about it best. Is if you read that it's still an argument that you're really going to respect. I mean, even if it didn't
come from a point of hate. The point is that he was in favor of the Iraq War because he felt that you could save lives doing that. You could be wrong and right in that, right? You can be like, this actually did more harm than good. But his intention wasn't like, I hate all Muslims, just bond them. It was that he saw that there was, some millions of people dying in some of these genocides.
That's because the conversation about narratives and like if you say something that is dissenting opinion. So what do you think, as someone who has been posting so much on Twitter, what do you think your most controversial post or your most controversial opinion that people have hated you the most for?
Oh, that's pretty easy. One, I learned very early on, never post anything about the Israel-Palestine conflict. I stay away from it almost completely. And the second thing that I learned very quickly, also don't post about it, veganism. Those people go full jihad really fast. like ISIS and vegans. People you don't want to mess with. Scary.
Let's be fair here. Vegans aren't chopping people's heads off, okay? Just once. So let's not. Yeah, no. I mean, that's usually the argument you get anytime you criticize anybody. It's like, hey, listen, they're not chopping people's heads off. The bar is really low. But you're right about the Israel-Palestine. I wrote an article in 2014 with 7 things to consider about the Israel-Palestine conflict. And it became like a really, really widely read viral article on HuffPost. And it was just everything I was getting from each side. I was getting crap from both sides for it. And it's just, they'll both just come and ambush you. It's amazing.
The reason I don't talk about it is not out of like fear or lack of interest, is that I feel it's so rare to come across people from any side of it, right? That can discuss it in an objective and rational way. It's very hard to find those people.
There's nobody who's dispassionate. To be dispassionate about that. And a lot of people are like, well, you're not on the ground. I'm like, well, all the people on the ground, like 50% of them think one way, 50% think the other way. It's the people who are actually not on the ground, who are out there, who don't have a dog in the race, that are actually making the best arguments about that issue. I think the best person to handle it was Bruno. Have you seen the movie Bruno?
Yes.
Yeah, when he went in, I'm like, that he treated that issue with the seriousness it deserves, because I think it's just so overblown. And it's, again, it's ultimately still, if you roll the snowball back up the hill from where it started, it really is just about a fight over land, just divine, who it was allotted to. And it's just the rest of it's so disproportionately highlighted. Like in Darfur, it was interesting. Like Darfur was, Omar al-Bashir, who was the Arab leader of Sudan. He killed 500,000, black African Muslims. So it's like a Muslim Arab killed, these black African Muslims. And that was just so silent. But, every time something like this happens in Israel, when it's the Jews doing it, then it's just absolutely insane how crazy people get. You just hear it all over the place. So
when people say, anytime somebody asks me whose side I'm on, I actually don't mind that question, because I like to tell people there are 2 sides, but it's not the ones you think. I'm on the side of the secularists in Palestine and Israel, and I'm against the religious fundamentalists in Israel and Palestine. It's not Palestinians and Israelis. And a while ago, I did thorough investigation, from my background, because I wanted to learn more about it. And when people say it's about land, that's true, but it's about the divinity of that land, because every negotiation that they've come pretty close to coming to a resolution, always the stopping point, always the point where they can't move forward and they can't reach that final resolution.
Jerusalem
And the Temple Mount specifically. Yeah. They don't know how to divide Jerusalem. They don't know what to do with the Temple Mount. And even Arafat, when he was negotiating for it, they came very close. There was 2 points of contention. Was one with the border with Jordan. They wanted Israel to have control over the crossing of the border, because they didn't want militants coming in, even into Palestine, which would put them in danger. It was a minor point. They could still get past it. But what the hell could they do with that piece of land? That has always been the point where they couldn't move forward. So when people say it's not about religion, it's about land, it's about that land, and that land is about religion. Right? So,
yeah.
So I don't understand. One thing, first, I have 2 questions now. One of them is, you mentioned the Christian Palestinians that wanted support a Palestinian state, but they are being discriminated by the Muslims. Wouldn't having a Palestinian state put them more under under an Islamic regime,
Right.
and more victims of discrimination?
Well, those are two different kinds of people. So the people who live in Chile who have never lived there have that position where they're not anti-Israel, but they do want the establishment of a Palestinian state. But the family members who have lived there and have been discriminated, they're not too keen on that. Because if you're a Christian Arab who lives in Israel, you live pretty well. And you have the exact same problems of threats that the Jews face from Gaza.
Mm-hmm.
It isn't the rockets flying over or a bomb on a bus or somebody getting stabbed. The Christian Arabs face not only the same problem, but they get it worse
Because they're Arab.
because they're kind of the Arab Christians. They're like in the wrong. At least the Jews are the Jews, right? And it's the same thing with you guys.
feels so bad.
It's better to be just an atheist like Sam Harris than to be an ex-Muslim and to have left the religion, right? Because you're kind of with us, but now you're not. But the infidel born infidel.
Yeah, because it adds the element of being a traitor, right? Because now you're a traitor, you're an apostate.
And also,
Yeah.
Arab Christians have to carry all of this crap that they're not responsible for. Like, I feel really bad that, Arabs have a bad reputation that they've earned, but those were Arab Muslims. And now Arab Christians have to bear the brunt of that. When you tell if you're Christian, you tell someone you're an Arab, people are going to be like, oh, he's a terrorist.
So I have a family.
Arab Christians didn't do anything to deserve that.
I have a family story about that. I have an uncle who lives between Chile and Argentina, and he was in Argentina getting on a flight the same day as 9/11, and he was flying to the States. And because of his last name, which I won't say it's different from mine, but it's part of the family, and it's a very, very Arab sounding last name. They asked him to unboard the flight. They asked him to come off just because of his last name and just because it was Arab sounding. Doesn't matter. He's not Muslim. They don't know he's not Muslim. They just know he has an Arab last name. And that's why, and I've talked about this with Yasmin, I don't like that even in the United States, there's this idea that if you're Middle Eastern, you're Muslim. If you have an Arab sounding name, they say it's a Muslim name. But in the United States, you don't assume everybody's a Christian. You wouldn't say the last name Smith is a Christian name, right? But even the liberals who don't like to stereotype and don't like to put everybody into a box, they do it anyway. And they even feel like they're empowering or celebrating culture by doing that. Right. And I'll get all the time. People assume I'm an ex-Muslim because I say I'm from a Palestinian background. I feel like people should know not everybody from Palestine is necessarily Muslim. Not every Middle Easterner is Muslim. In Iraq, I'm sure Faisal can tell us there was much more than just Muslims there.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, in general, as a principle, I'm opposed to the concept of collective guilt. I mean, the fact that there are some terrorists who happen to be Muslim or terrorists because of Islam, and then people who have nothing to do with the whole situation get blamed for it and get banned, a travel ban, and get out from planes. I think that is where someone should set the line, right, between bigotry and legitimate fear. It's legitimate to fear someone who's a Salafist or someone who is harbor terrorist ideas, but I don't think it's legitimate to fear someone who looks just because they look close to Osama bin Laden. That should not be the metric of how someone treat each other. If you get it all the time 20 years ago, it means that British people should fear all Irish-looking people because many Irish people were terrorists, like this, part of the IRA, and they were blowing things up in the United Kingdom. Like this kind of collective guilt and trying to associate hate with everyone who looks Middle Eastern and stuff, I'm opposed to it in principle. And yes, unfortunately, many Christian Iraqis and many Christian minorities have been victims of anti-Muslim bigotry, right? Sikhs in the United States are being attacked for looking Muslims, and they have nothing to do with Islam to begin with, and they're being attacked because there have been cases against Indians-looking people who have been attacked because, quote-unquote, people thought they are the Muslims. I mean, it's a hell of an issue. Seems like Armin is quite horny for a question, so I don't want to.
Well, no, I just want to this point that this is a religious issue and not a political issue. I just wanted to make the counter argument that people give, like during the, Arab Empire and during the golden ages of the Arab Empire, it was safer for Jews to live. This is the argument that people make, for Jews to live under Islamic regimes than Christian regimes, right? Like they were more discriminated by the Christian Empire than the Byzantine Empire than they were by the Islamic. So Jews preferred to live under Islamic regimes, even with the Jizya and all that. Still, they preferred Muslims. So they say that's an argument for why Islam is not anti-Jewish, and this is not a religious thing, and this is more of a land political issue more than a religious thing. How would you respond to that argument?
Well, I would say, look, almost every argument anybody makes about anything, it's half true. There's some truth to it, at least, right? And there's some truth to that. Yeah, maybe at some point Jews and Muslims were cohabitat in certain areas, and they weren't exactly just pushing swords through each other. That's true, but they were also second-class citizens, right? And if you rather not live as a second-class citizen, I mean, this is an important thing because, like I was saying, most Christian Palestinians, most Christian Arabs are not in the Middle East anymore, and that's causing something really bad. And the problem is, it's continuing even today, right now. Religious minorities from Arab countries are still leaving. And that's, aside from all the refugee crisis people talk about, it's increasing the amount of just Muslims you have there. And that's not good for the Muslim people there. They're less around people of different religions. They're less around diversity, and you're just creating states that are close to 100% Muslim right now, right? Like I said, like there's 50,000 Palestinian Christians in the Palestinian territories. There's 500,000 just in Chile. There's 6 million Lebanese, probably mostly of Christian background, in Brazil. The fact that they're all leaving, right? They just can't live with these people.
But I have a counter argument to this. I mean, yes, you are right. But at the same time, what you're ignoring also is the rise of ex-Muslims in Muslim countries. So Muslims until today, I mean, if you're going to take the statistics, and there isn't many like accurate ones, at least not the scientific ones, but like in countries like, including Saudi Arabia, in which 20% of people, or maybe less, 10%, 20%.
But if it's not really diversity, Faisal, if they can't admit that they're ex-Muslim.
No, but they are I mean, they admit to their own circles, so the people can notice.
That's not diversity.
The Gallup poll has said that 5% of people in Saudi Arabia are.
But Faisal, what you're talking
yeah.
about right now adds to my own points, that Muslim majority mentality, because all the minorities are leaving. What's happening with the ex-Muslims? It's such a concise, condensed Muslim society that what do the ex-Muslims do? They just want to get the hell out of there. They don't want to stay. They can't even admit they're atheists.
This is totally true, and I agree. And especially since there's a lot of things that I grew up being taught, and I'm sure you all grew up being taught too, about how Jews were like these horrible people and non-Muslims are all out to get you. And that doesn't work so well. It didn't work so well for me because I was in Canada. But for people that are in Muslim majority countries like 90% or more, where you're never going to interact with somebody who's a non-Muslim, you actually believe that. And I was talking to a guy named Hashim who's Iraqi, and he was saying that he was like 10 years old and he still thought that Jews were like these aliens from outer space. He didn't even think that they were human.
Yeah. Can I say something to, I think, going back to Armin's point about the politics versus religion thing. When it comes to the Abrahamic religion, specifically with Judaism and Islam, they're inherently political. These religions are. So let's look at one thing. You have that crowd, people like, oh, I'm not anti-Judaism, I'm anti-Zionist. Well, Zionist is a part of the Torah. It's a part of Jewish scripture. And people who say, well, it's the same thing like jihad in Islam. Jihad is a part of Islam. So I actually just want to go, just for the listeners, some of in Exodus, right, in the Old Testament, I'm reading out of it. It says, I will establish your borders from the Red Sea to the Mediterranean Sea, and from the desert to the Euphrates River. I will give into your hands the people who live in the land, and you will drive them out before you. Do not make a covenant with them or their gods. And in Deuteronomy 1:8, see, I have given you this land. Go in and take possession of the land the Lord swore he would give to your fathers and to their descendants after them. On the other hand, in Islam, you have lots. You have the Surah 5, verse 51, where it says, do not take the Jews and Christians and allies. You have the hadith of the Dagach tree, which actually explicitly commands Muslims to kill the Jews. So these are things that predate any of the political issues. They predate Theodor Herzl. They predate, even the modern political movement of Zionism, or, the resurgence of jihad with Salafism and all that stuff. This is all right from the scripture. So this is absolutely rooted in religion. Anybody who argues against it is just completely ignorant of the roots of the religion.
And also to answer, I think,
and it is political.
Armin's question is that the leaving of the Middle East is nothing new, right? Like the history of my family is not just my family. This is hundreds, if not millions, of people at the end of the 19th century and 20th century were just getting the hell out of there. And it was sometimes people of the exact same race as you, as other Arabs, as Turks, but they were the wrong religion. And it's just a matter to see how it was so unlivable at that time that they needed to leave, right? So history it can tell you the answer to that question about how well people lived among Muslims, the Ottoman Empire.
I mean, I have a question, just one question to add to what Ali was saying about that these religions are inherently political and stuff. So I know that, Lalo, that I see that you are pretty much engaging with many people who are like Muslim reformers and stuff. I mean, what do you think of this kind of movement that is trying to separate political Islam from Islam as a religion and political Judaism from Judaism? What do you think? What do you think of the Muslim reform movement?
Well, we talked about that on my podcast. There was a second part we talked about reform. My aversion to the reform movement, but not the reformers. The reformers are good people. If you look up Ashraf Romani or Majid Nawaz, these are people I love. And if anytime they're attacked as people, they're put on lists like on the Southern Poverty Law Center, I'm disgusted. Like, these are good people, right? These are people who hold 99% liberal values and rational thinking values.
Faisal, are you talking about in the Middle East, or are you asking Lalo the same topic that we talked about in our podcast?
I mean, my question is that, like, do you think that these religions are inherently political, that you cannot separate the political aspect from the religion, which is something that Reform is trying to accomplish?
So I'm not a Muslim scholar. I'm not a scholar of Islam, but I've read quite a bit that I can kind of keep up with the conversation. And the Quran, it doesn't take too much to read it, though I've read the whole thing. I've read a little hadith, and I probably won't read most of the hadiths. But basically, the Quran reads as, you guys know, do this, don't do that, do this, don't do that. Every page, there is an order of what to do and what not to do. And it's very specific about what to do in your life as far as eating, divorce, marriage, everything is explained there. To say it's not political is to say politics isn't political. It's almost more political than it is religious. It makes less claims about how the universe and the earth and the natural world work than it does just tell you what to do. It's almost like a set of legal books that just on top of it that says, oh, by the way, this was created by God. So I would say it's mostly political. It's almost not even religious. is except for that one element that these political books, these legal books, you could say more, were written by God. So to say that you can disconnect Islam from politics is not the same as saying you can disconnect Buddhism from politics, which makes no legal claims. Buddhism doesn't tell you how to get married, how to divorce, what to do, how many witnesses you need in the case of rape. Buddhism is not going to tell you anything like that. So that's why you don't really, you can't get laws out of Buddhism, right? You can't say, what did the Buddha say? Like, how many witnesses do you need when a woman gets raped? We have, well, nothing. Didn't say anything like that. Well, how do you get divorced in Buddhism? He doesn't know. He was talking about transcendence and reincarnation. So to even try, I mean, this is where we go again into just all religions are just not the same. And to say they're not the same is just an understatement, right? What is it Sam Harris said? It's like saying video games and race car drivers and Muay Thai fighters are all sports, but they have nothing to do with one another. Mm-hmm. Absolutely nothing. And these things just have nothing to do with one another. And for the reformers, the reform movement, another problem is aside from the fact that I don't think it's realistic considering the aspects of Islam, I don't like the fact personally that it's even proposed. I don't even like the fact that they're proposing a reform of Islam because I feel like it's another racism of low expectations because we in the West do this with nothing. We don't say climate change deniers need reform. We don't say anti-vaxxers need reform and they need to be less. Or even in religious cases, we don't say in the case of people who believe in creationism, we don't say creationism needs reform. We just say they need to understand evolution. End of story. And if you want to believe in it, you can't do it in schools. Do it at your church. But and if you're going to bring it into the public sphere, we're gonna fight you on it. And we do nothing like that with like what people are proposing with Islam, where we're going to baby step them into truth, where we're going to first offer them some moderate lies to bring them finally truth. No, you start with the truth, and you should always speak the truth. I know that my point of view comes from a person who never held religion as truth at all. So maybe people have a very different understanding from atheism and truth as me. However, I do see a double standard that this baby step version is not done in anything in Western society at all. And I don't think we should hold Islam to a lower standard. And to that typical argument that you're not going to make all of the Middle East atheists tomorrow, you're not going to make the Middle East anything old tomorrow. Nothing. You're not going to change the Middle. Forget it. Faisal said once, the Middle East is quantum physics. Forget it. You're not going to make them moderate. You're not going to make them all scientists. You're not going to make them all liberals who love the Jews and love the gays and give women equal rights. You're not going to do it. Forget it. Nothing is going to happen in absolutes when it comes to the Middle East. At least offer them truth. At least offer them science. I think because the difference between reform movement and just offer them science and truth is that there is truth. There is evidence. And that goes a long way with people. Well, I'm ranting. Sorry.
No, it's good. It's good to hear your opinion on that. But just to bring it back to the topic about the Chilean Palestinians. So you were talking about how Christian Palestinians and Israelis, so Jewish people in Israel, Palestine, have sort of like this shared misery. They're both being they both understand each other when it comes to threats from Muslims in that area. So actually, my question is for Faisal and what it's like for non-Muslims in Iraq. Did you ever interact with non-Muslims in Iraq? And is it similar to what Lalo was describing in Palestine/Israel?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up with many people who are Christian Iraqis and Yazidis. We used to have a Yazidi neighbor. I mean, obviously, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is not the most subject talked about within these minorities in Iraq.
No, but I mean, like, are the Christians and are the non-Muslim groups all being discriminated against by the Muslims in the same way that it happens in Palestine?
It depends which era. I mean, for example, within the Saddam regime, he kind of, I don't know if I use the word favoritism, but Saddam favored Iraqi Christians and Iraqi religious minorities over Shias because he considered them less of a threat to his political, like, Sunni establishment compared to the Shia establishment. So he had much more discrimination against Shias because he thought that they are more associated with Ayatollah Khomeini and the Iran Revolution, and instead of the way that they would overthrow his regime, while the Christians in Iraq would never be able to overthrow Saddam regime. So, over the past, pre-2003, the Ba'ath Party actually had, I would say, favorable views of Iraqi Christians compared to what we have now with Islamists, like Hizb al-Da'wah and others. The founder of the Ba'ath Party, Michel Aflaq, he's a Christian. So many of the...
So do the Shia treat non-Muslims the same way Sunnis do?
Not on the same level, but they're not going to treat them well. So, obviously, when it comes to Sunni Muslims and extremism, there's kind of a low standard of what actually the treatment should be. But I would say that Shias, that takes us kind of, I think, behavioral economics in a sense, is that Shias, because they're also a minority in the Muslim world, they tend to be, quote unquote, more open to minorities because, quote unquote, same struggle against the Saudis and against the Sunni establishment. So they tend to be kind of more favorable of minorities than the Sunni minorities are, or Sunni majorities are treat their minorities. So, you'll find, for example, like in Lebanon, you see that there are some alliances happening between the Christian Maronites and Hezbollah and the Shia parties, because they tend to be kind of like, we are minority, you are minority, we're both standing against the Sunni. So there's a lot of geopolitics involved. But I would say that, Christians have been discriminated against more by Sunni folks after the 2003, when like ISIS and Al-Qaeda have killed many Christians and many of them have been driven away out of Iraq. But I don't think of any case in which Christians and Yazidis were burned alive by Shias. And that's not me being the Shia here. It's just like, it's a fact that Sunni militias have harmed more minorities like Christians and Yazidis compared to Sunni militias have harmed more than the Shia militias. Like groups like Al-Sadr or like Muqtada al-Sadr, like Mahdi Army and others have not committed, to my knowledge, any act of like discrimination, or not discrimination, but like killing and raping, as in case of ISIS, against Christians or Yazidis.
Well, they did in Iran against the Kurds when the Kurds tried to get independence from Iran.
But that's ethnic. That's not religious based, right? So it's not that the Iranians are killing the Kurds because the Kurds were Christian, right? Or because they were Zoroastrians.
Aren't the Shias doing that? Aren't the Shias getting revenge of all Sunnis every time they recapture a village from ISIS? Don't they punish all the Sunnis in the area for the crimes of ISIS? Aren't they doing that right now?
But they're not. Again, I'm not here trying to defend the Shias here, but are they? So the question, as far as I understood it, is that the discrimination against Christians and religious minorities done by groups. Let's say the Iraqi army and the Hashd al-Sha'bi, what's called in English, I forgot. The like this kind of Shia militia that is now fighting against ISIS with the Iraqi army, there hasn't been cases of crimes committed by them against Christians and Yazidis in Mosul. It's always been ISIS crimes against Yazidis in Mosul and other places around Iraq, but there has never been case of Shia killing of Christian minorities in Iraq.
That makes sense to me because, like you were saying, the minorities would all sort of group together to fight the Sunni,
the bigger enemy. In that
majority.
sense, it is in that sense, it's now ISIS and Al Qaeda and other militias.
So what about Hezbollah in Palestine?
You mean in Lebanon?
Do either of you guys have something to say about that?
I mean, Hezbollah is mostly Lebanon. And initially it's called Hizb al-Shaitan by some of this party of Satan, by some of the Sunni militias that are also fighting against Israel. So in a weird way, they think that, I was doing media analysis on this. In a weird way, they think that Hezbollah, Assad, and Russia are actually allied with Israel against the Sunni militias fighting in Syria. So, like, for example, Ahrar al-Sham and Jabhat al-Nusra, which is now called Fath al-Sham, they think that Russia and Hezbollah and Israel are all working together against the Sunni and Muslim Brotherhood. So it's like,
Hezbollah's aim is to have a Palestinian state, like they're fighting against the Israelis.
Well, they want to wipe out Israel, and they also, but at the same time, Hezbollah is involved in fighting Sunni militias in Syria.
Can I comment about Hezbollah, since Hezbollah is a Iranian invention?
Oh, is it?
Partially, it's partially. It's supported by Iran a lot, but it's not. It's mostly made of Lebanese people.
Yeah, it is made of Lebanese, but it's a Shia army, and that's basically Iran's way of spreading its tentacles throughout the Middle East. It is an Iranian proxy by all means, I think. I mean, look at the signs that they take. They have Khamenei and Khomeini photos, and everywhere they go.
No doubt. I've been to their areas in southern Lebanon and in southern Beirut. You enter southern Beirut, and they have the picture of Ayatollah Khomeini, your people.
Yeah. Can I ask a question from our guest? Because I think he made a very important point that I just want to make sure if I got it right. And that was about, if I remember correctly. So I think what you were, correct me if I'm wrong, but what you were trying to point out is that the discrimination by Muslim Palestinians against Christians and atheist ex-Muslims, because the same discrimination they have against these groups is kind of that they have against Jews, so is kind of your way of proving that this is a religious thing. Because if this was a just purely political thing, they wouldn't have the same kind of hatred towards Palestinian Christians and ex-Muslims, right? It would be only against Israel. But because they have the same level of hatred towards these groups, that's kind of was suggest to you that this is a religious thing. Is that what you were trying to get at? Or
let me put it this way.
Yeah.
People have the assumption that because Muslims in the Middle East support Palestine vocally, they give a shit about Palestinians. They couldn't give it less a shit. That is something that had dawned on me long time ago. These people who go on and on about how the Jews treat the Palestinians, they don't give a fuck. Because in the past, they never treated the Palestinians well. And today, they also don't treat the Palestinians well. The Palestinian diaspora in Chile or the United States are treated actually very well. We're just part of the country. How are the Palestinians treated in the Middle East and the diaspora? They're not even given citizenship. They're not even allowed to integrate into the societies. They don't give a fuck about them. And most of them are Muslims. And when they talk about Palestinians, what they mean is Muslim Palestinians. They don't care about Christian Palestinians. And another thing is, when Iran talks about they want to wipe out Israel, a lot of these psychos, and not so much in the country, I imagine, Iran, from what I understand, Iranians are much more liberal at this point, but the psychos in the government who want just to see Israel wiped out in a lake of fire, which is usually an atomic bomb, they would get up and cheer, but that would take out all of Palestine with it. And they wouldn't care. These people don't care about Palestine in the least. And
they care about Israel. They care about wiping out Israel at whatever cost.
Exactly.
Right?
That's their priority. So
actually, to be fair, they don't want to wipe. They like Israel. They used to like Israel as an enemy. This is, you have to understand, these people are not idiots, right? They sound like idiots, but they know what they're doing. I think like
Hashtag Trump.
I believe I think like people like Hamas, if you offer them like a wish to wipe out Israel, like they will secretly wish you wouldn't do that, you know. And I think a lot of people in the Israeli military, if you offer them to wipe out Hamas, they also wish that you wouldn't do that, because they're like Hamas's entire existence and funding and support from all these private donors around the world is dependent on the existence of this enemy. You know what I mean? And
I disagree with
Iran.
you.
Well,
I think they're much more rational than they really are. I think that if you give them the weapons, if Hamas has the same weapons Israel have right now, Israel will not exist tomorrow. Because the only reason why Israel exists, I'm not that I want to sound like a right winger here, because I think that's a quote from Netanyahu. Netanyahu said that if the Palestinians give up their weapons, there will be peace. If Israel gives up their weapons, there will be no Israel. So the thing is, like Hamas, if they have the same access to technology and the technology that the Israeli military has because of the US, then Israel will not exist. And I think that, yes, I mean, some of the rational actors of them may be benefiting from Israel. I think that people like Bashar al-Assad, who I think is not really religious, may be using the Palestinian issue to leverage more people against Israel and try to shift their dissent from the locals to Israel. But I don't think that people like Hamas or ideological Islamists would actually think about the rationale why they exist. They actually want to wipe out Israel.
I agree with Faisal. I think you with the people more rational you'll find are in the West Bank versus Gaza. I think you will find hardcore fundamentalists, and that's why they don't get along.
Well, I do think that people that follow them are hardcore like they're sheep that follow them. But I think like a lot of these organizations, the leadership is a little bit more rational than people give them credit for, because they wouldn't, like, at least in Iran, I do think if you look at the details behind the strategy, if you're looking at it from far away, it looks really crazy. But if you actually look at why they're doing what they're doing, it makes a lot of sense for the leaders, for the people that follow them. There's a lot of religious sheep, but there's a lot of more thought that goes into these actions. And I think a lot of us, by thinking that they're all just crazy wackos, are, I just think we're underestimating our enemy, right? Go on.
Can I say something? Because I studied international relations, and we talked a lot about crazy leaders and how crazy they are. And I had a teacher who said very something similar to what you said, that the leader in Iran or North Korea or wherever it is, you have these, despots who seem psycho. It's like none of them are really psycho. It's all just strategy. It's all just like it's just to manipulate the following. Religion is just used as a tool. But I think that's maybe true sometimes, but it's also, you shouldn't underestimate that. I imagine I've met people who are fervent religious fundamentalists, fervently. And to think that those people never reach positions of power is a little bit naive. No. Those people often do reach positions of power. It might sometimes be the case that you're talking about, but not always.
I'm not saying they're not religious, and I'm not saying they're not psycho, but I think that it could be, sometimes it's both true at the same time. You could be a religious psycho, but still be politically strategic. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, that's true. I mean, you could be very smart and still be a complete religious nutbag.
Yeah, and I think
you could be a genius and still be a religious nutbag. You could be a savant, right? You could, but
that's what I'm arguing. What I'm arguing is that these people at the top, even though they're religious nutbags, a lot of their actions make political sense for their survival. Not for the good of the people, but for their survival, it does make a lot of political sense.
I agree with you there, but you shouldn't confuse that with that they're only using religion as a tool. Sometimes these people are extremely religious.
Yeah, and also, I mean, strategic and religious may actually go hand in hand. I mean, especially with the case with Iran, is that it does make total sense that people like Ayatollahs don't want to go like in a complete war with Israel tomorrow, to weaken up their army, to the way that they're going to be vulnerable to Sunni militias around them to destroy Ayatollahs. So they could be strategic, but they are strategic within religious thinking to preserve the Iranian guardianship system, the Iranian Ayatollah system. You would need to be strategic of who you pick wars with, and
Yes.
not to weaken your army. But that strategic thinking is also confined within religious thinking. So it's confined within religious. So they are religious strategic people. They're less. Yes. So people like Ayatollahs, I think they're much more strategic and think much long term than people like ISIS do, who probably like go invade country after the other and then go face 33 armies on the next day. But I think they're both aligned in a very kind of religious mindset that make them
Sometimes
more
not
alike.
just religious. There's also, like, for example, Hugo Chavez used the same strategy of making, talking about the great Satan of America to kind of have an enemy for the Venezuelans, and he put it in the context of capitalism versus socialism. It wasn't even religious, but it's the same message.
Well, so communism is a religion, but yeah.
Yeah,
But that's
that's true.
Actually, that's a very, very good point that you guys make. But the thing is that the religion, the art of using religion is the art of being able to be a good bullshitter, right? And within those borders of religion, if you could master that art, there's a lot of flexibility on finding excuses for what you're doing. But yes, you're right. There are some borders that you can't go out of unless you are so political savvy, like somebody that managed to change those borders. Like when somebody like Khomeini comes and he basically redefines Shia Islam, not only he's manipulating both the religion within those borders, he's actually changing those borders to serve the causes that he wants. And again, the good thing about this religion thing is that you can actually believe it, but you're not actually manipulating just other people. You're manipulating yourself as well. So it's not like you're thinking that you're conning other people. You have to convince yourself sometimes also that this is in line with your religious thinking, even though if you were actually being honest with yourself, you're actually more focused on power and your survival, but then you have to convince yourself that this also makes religious sense. You know what I mean? I don't know how many of these people go as far as convincing themselves or deluding themselves, because you can't be in these people's minds, or how many of them are actually thinking, oh, these people are idiots, let me just use them. But I think it's possible for you to take advantage of people and be smart, be very strategic about it, but also convince yourself that this is in line with your religious teaching.
I think it's a chicken or the egg argument. It's like, what comes first, the religion or the power? I think that for some people, I think this is both. They go hand in hand. Just like us, we are secular jihadists, right? We want secularism to win, and we're using tools like this to spread it. Is that I think that someone like Ayatollah Khamenei and Khomeini before, and now other groups within Sunni Islam like ISIS and others, they believe in it and they want to use power to spread the word. I don't think I don't think they're using power and using religion to enhance their power. I think religion is part of power. But I think Yasmin has something to say. She's waiting for us. She doesn't have something to say. So
I'd add something a little bit off topic that I wanted to say that I want to get out before we end. To just going back to a little bit to the whole history of my family and the narrative, too much association between Arabs and Muslims, is that I don't like that the narrative in the West, whether it be in Canada, the US, or in Europe, is too much around. Well, Faisal was kind of talking about this with before, but the right wing, for example, attacks all Middle Easterners as a race, right? They're racist. They just don't like brown people. But then the people on the left defend Muslims as if they were a race, which is also annoying and it's also racist, right? To treat Muslims like they're a race, even though some of these people are very similar to me. For example, Linda Sarsour, like I said, like I don't like her, but we have actually a lot in common. We're both Palestinians born in the US, but we don't share the same religion. But they treat her like a minority, not because of her Palestinian background, not because of her Arab background, but because she's a Muslim. And that's just an ideological aspect to her family. It's not an ethnic, it's not a racial aspect to her background. Because I don't have that, even though we have the kind of ethnic part in common. But if I say like I'm a Palestinian, Arab, Latino in background, that my family came from Palestine and they were Christian Orthodox, but I'm third generation atheist, people think that's very strange. Shouldn't you be a Muslim? And I think that from the left and not the right is very damaging. And I don't like to play identity politics too much, but I feel that my identity does kind of break the narrative that the left has kind of absorbed, that Islam is a race. And I can take that out of context a little in my background, so they can kind of wake up to the fact that not everybody with an Arabic sounding last name is automatically of Muslim background. And I think that's important. They know that. They know that when it comes to American, they're never going to assume if somebody says they're American, oh, then you must be a Christian. They know not to say that. But somebody could say, but aren't most Americans Christian? Yeah, but still, they're not going to say it. Still, they're not going to put people in a box. But they fucking do it to people of Arab background. And I think that's one of the things that is detaining this whole conversation. This is one of the reasons that every person invited on any TV show is a Muslim in a hijab, and they're not inviting people like you guys, right? Ex-Muslims. You guys are nothing. I was talking with Yasmin the other day, and suddenly TED Talks came up. And there are no TED Talks with ex-Muslims. Did you know that? There's not a single TED Talk with an ex-Muslim.
I never actually... Yeah, that's a good point.
There's tons of hijabis. There's tons of ex-Christians. There's the Westboro Baptist Church ex-member.
Yeah.
There's all kinds of ex-everything you'll find, right? There's not a one. Ayan doesn't have a TED Talk. There's no ex-Muslim TED Talk. Can you imagine?
Actually,
that there's not one?
I have a question. Since you probably have looked at the TED Talks much more than I have, even though I like TED Talks. But have you seen any ex-minority there that is talking about religion?
What is an ex-minority? Yeah. Somebody who left blackness.
Yeah, no. Yeah, so speaking of black, like, have you seen any ex-Christian from a black background talking about the homophobia in the African-American community? Or ex-Christian from Hispanic background talking about the homophobia and misogyny in Hispanic communities? I think it's a minority issue. I think that people like TED and other liberal platforms, they are very much okay with a white Christian talking about their background and criticizing their former background, but they're never okay with a minority criticizing the religion and the culture of the minorities that the liberals are trying to defend.
Okay, but I would add to that a little bit that it's very rare to find Latinos who are well-known atheists, right? It's not. I don't know if you guys can think of a well-known atheist who's Latino like me. I don't know of too many.
Gloria Alvarez.
Some black. Okay, you know one.
Yeah.
but it's very uncommon. Asian, for example, atheists who are outspoken is very rare. Like Melissa, we've talked about this. It's like it's just her.
Yeah.
Right. But it's just very rare. However, ex-Muslims who are very outspoken, who are actually very famous, are not rare at all. There's plenty. In fact, they're pretty well known in certain circles. Many of you guys I put in that category. But you're not getting invited to a lot of these things. And that is bothering me a lot. Why is Jihad Mohammed, who is the fencer who wore a hijab and she was in the Olympics, why is she on Ellen? The only reason she got tweeted about by Hillary Clinton,
Obama maybe,
and she got invited on shows like Ellen was because she was wearing a hijab. She's a woman of color in hijab. That's it. But why don't they have on, one of all of these Saudi girls who have escaped Saudi Arabia? They have amazing stories, right? And they're full liberal. Like I left this fundamentalism. I hold liberal ideas now. They're never going to get invited on. Why don't they get a TED Talk?
We should have a sleeper cell hijabi as ex-Muslim pretending be a Muslim and get invited to a show, and then all of a sudden in the middle of a show take your hijab off and be like, start this thing.
Yasmin, can you do this, please?
Yeah. Yes, I can hear you. Are you muted?
Yeah, muted, Yasmin.
Oh, sorry, I was muted. Yeah, I said I would totally do that. I would totally strip off my hijab right on the TED Talk stage. Oh my God, that would be so awesome.
Yeah. I mean, you can lure them. You can say like, my speech title is how wonderful the hijab is, and then you go.
It's so empowering. I'm such a feminist.
And then how to be a Muslim and a feminist, and then like you take off your hijab.
You could mix it with your true. You could mix it with your true story and be like, I'm a Muslim. I was married to forced to an Al Qaeda member, but I'm going to come and learn the true Islam, and that's not the true Islam. And I'm going to tell you about, and they'd be like,
you know what, you guys, this is getting in my head now. Like, I want to do this.
Yeah. Put on it. Can you stand wearing a hijab for a few months though?
I would do it for this reason.
For this, you feign being like, you're gonna talk about Islamophobia and hijabophobia, and you get on there with the hijab.
Like, I want to write
and
this
just suddenly
right now.
you just rip it off, and you're just like, I'm an atheist, and Islam is.
And I'll throw it into the audience.
Oh, and then the first slide has to say in big letters a picture of a hijab, and it has to say above it, chastity helmet.
Oh,
boom.
Yes. Hashtag chastity helmet.
Hashtag chastity helmet. There you go.
By the way, speaking of representation, I think we need, and maybe Lalo, you can tell us a few ideas. I think we need like another ex-Muslim because hashtag campaign. I think we need Lalo, you raised the point of representation. I remember ex-Muslim because was covered by the BBC. I think Time Magazine also covered it. We may probably need something else, like some new hashtag, some new thing to get all the people who are, as you said, like visibly ex-Muslim, people who try to speak out and known in some circles, to actually make it to movies, to media interviews. What do you guys have any idea of what could be something like a future campaign? I mean, Lalo, you mentioned that like we lack representation. How can we get representation? What's your ideas on that?
I think it was just unearthed not that long ago, the whole guardianship system in Saudi. I think that needs also a lot of traction too. The hashtag stop enslaving Saudi women. What is the other one? Not hashtag not your guardian.
Yeah.
I am my own guardian.
I am sorry. Hashtag I am my own guardian. Those also need to be moved a lot more. And I think those girls with amazing stories also, and more than hashtags, I think what you guys are doing and what I'm also going to try to do on my podcast of giving these girls a voice, other ex-Muslims, because the thing is, you can push hashtags, but people don't know these stories that well because, again, they're not getting interviewed, right? Who knew the stories of how Saudi women lived, or women in the Middle East in general, or what it's like to be an ex-Muslim, even as a man or a woman? Like, you guys know this from just private interactions mostly with other people, but this is of great interest. I'm sure you see this online. If you put out some of these stories, like short videos or something like that, they get tons of retweets. People want to hear them, but for some reason, it's the liberal media. I hate to sound like a Trump supporter when they talk about the liberal left media, but in this case, it is true. They don't care about these people whatsoever. And so if they're not going to give them a platform, even if we have small audiences, I'm going to try and give them a platform. I know you guys are. And I think that, what little we can do now, I think eventually I have hope that these things will catch on. I really do. And we'll be at the forefront of doing it before others were. And I think if you match that with hashtags, I think it'll go further, because hashtags, they come and go very fast.
The hashtag did feel really good, though. It felt
It
really,
did, yeah.
It was so nice to have that sense of community, because we're all over the globe and nobody, like, people are just free in their own minds. Like, they can't even talk to their own friends or family. So it was really nice to be like, oh my God, look how many of us are out there. So that actually is what motivated me to start getting into this activism and writing my book and everything was.
I posted a picture of a girl with an ex-Muslim hashtag on Facebook, on Atheist Republic, and it got removed by Facebook. It was
God.
What?
it was just, and we got a ban for it. We got a few days ban for it. It was just a girl holding. It was actually by the Council of Ex-Muslims in Britain, and she had the picture of ex-Muslim because I don't know, something about slavery, something about I forgot what her message was, but she had a Quran verse. And it got removed by Facebook. And like, what the hell? Like,
What?
this is, yeah. Actually, I'll share it with you guys which one was removed. It's such a harmless
unbelievable
thing. And it was like, it can't be because of the Quranic verse, because if you're removing the Quranic verse, then you have to remove a lot of Islamic pages.
Right.
But it's like, I don't understand who.
So I have an idea, which is actually, I took it from someone I know. I mean, if we're probably going to take it to like an offline level, how about like we take these hashtags and not hashtags, but like these pictures, like the one that you mentioned from, I think, Zuhal Khan and other people.
Oh, right. That's her name.
Yeah.
That's probably the picture you're talking about.
Yeah.
I know exactly what you're talking about. And if we can get these printed and like we can put them on like US campuses, we can like start a movement of people posting this in like the ad of every college campus around the United States. It was like, ex-Muslims, they exist, and we have to talk about them. This is kind of like in your face movement. Like, we need to be I mean, people tell me like, oh, why do you always do marketing and stuff? Like, well, fuck yeah, we need marketing. We need more people to know about us. It's just
that's
something
but that's something you guys really have to learn from people like Dalia Mugakhed, Linda Sarsour. As much as we don't like what those women have to say a lot of the time. But a lot of these people, at least they're motivated, they're active, and they do a lot.
They also have the backing of Qatari and Saudi money
that
and
is
Muslim
true.
Brotherhood for Dalia Mugakhed's case, right?
Yeah, they can get millions of dollars at the drop of a hat from from a lot of these people. So
or
that
the
helps a
supportive
lot.
care.
So we lack funding. Against, if anybody wants to fund us, please fund all of us. I mean, it's not
okay. Actually, if you don't want to fund us, you could even still support us by rating this podcast. Just go to iTunes or Stitcher and give us a review. But
show me the money.
I have a question, a counter argument. What if people in the liberals in the West say, okay, you guys are ex-Muslim and fine, whatever, but the reason why I don't want to focus on your movement is because here right now I'm seeing a lot of anti-Muslim bigotry, and I want to support Muslims right now because there's a lot of discrimination against Muslims, and I don't want to get behind anything that is anti-Islamic because right now there's too much forces against Muslims with the Trump and all these bigots. And so how would you respond to that?
I have a lot to say about that.
I would say, to begin with, you're not wrong to want to oppose anti-Muslim bigotry. That is a good thing to oppose, but you have to remember, most of the worst people who are against Muslims are actually against just Middle Easterners. They're actually just against brown people and foreigners in general. The worst discrimination you're going to see from the right, the far right, the conservative Christian white right, those people are in the United States. They're mostly in Middle America. They are out there, but they just don't like foreigners, especially they just don't like Middle Easterners, right? So they're not really against the Muslims. That's just the catchphrase for them. They wouldn't like me either. They wouldn't like Faisal if they met him. And Faisal and me are atheists, right? So I would say you don't have to support a conservative religion to defend minorities, because there's plenty of these minorities that you want to defend aren't Muslim. And you're putting us all into a box. You're actually putting us in the same box that these bigots that you're opposing are putting us in. So you're being just like them. You're putting us into a religious box that they are calling just all us Muslims. And you're saying, oh, I want to defend this same box that I'm generalizing that are Muslims, but we're not. So if you want to defend us, call us by the right name. Don't generalize us. Don't think we all are praying towards Mecca, right? We're not all. For example, when I posted on Twitter, a lot of people were surprised when I was talking about the hijab that I said less than half of the Muslim women in the United States don't wear hijab. But the American, even liberals, even on the left who want to defend Muslim women, assume that they all wear, or at least most wear a hijab. 40% do. So it's not representative of Muslim women. And aside from the Muslim women, there's plenty of just Arab people. There's plenty of Lebanese and Palestinian and Syrian who are not Muslim. So what about us? Are you on our side too? Because these people hate us as well. So I would say that. Are you abandoning me? Are you abandoning Faisal? Why? Don't we deserve to be treated with respect as well? What's this Islamophilia that you have?
Yasmin?
I was going to say something along those same lines. I was going to say, well, we get it double anyway. Like the right are going to, if they have a problem with brown-skinned people, then they have a problem with brown-skinned ex-Muslims. It's not like they're going to sit and ask us what our political beliefs are before they discriminate against us, right? So we're getting it from them. And then we're getting it from the Muslims as well, because they'll hate us because we're ex-Muslims, of course. We're traitors. And then we get it from the left because we are the minority within the minority that they aim to protect. So like how you said it before, Lalo, the minority of my minority.
No, the oppressed minority of my oppressed minority is my enemy.
There you go.
Yeah.
That's funny. Yeah, that's actually funny.
Yeah, funny and true, unfortunately.
It is, yeah. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry, Yasmin. Sorry to interrupt. Yeah.
No, that's just exactly what I was going to say. Like we're talking about like, oh, we don't want the Muslims to get more discriminated against. It's like, well, we're getting triply discriminated against right now. So when is it ever going to be okay for us to speak up? There's never going to be a good time. When the ex-Muslim because hashtag came out, people are like, this isn't a good time to be bringing that up. When are you guys not killing people across the planet? Like, when is it ever a good time to bring it up? Because every time I get my Facebook saying like, oh, this is what happened last year, and I scroll through, oh, look at that. I was talking about some bombing that happened in Brussels or in Paris or somewhere. It's constant. There's never going to be a good time for ex-Muslims to speak up when we're not going to be accused of like, oh, this isn't a good time for Muslims because there's anti-Muslim bigotry. There's anti-Muslim bigotry going on because it's a reaction to what's happening in the world.
Yeah, I mean,
and in the same way that I was saying that, unfortunately, Arab Christians have to put up with this shit that they have nothing to do with, ex-Muslims have to put up with this shit as well. Like, we have nothing to do with this. We don't believe in any of those causes, but we get the backlash for it too, just because we look Muslim or because not Muslim, but you know how people think, okay, yeah, you're brown, or we have Muslim sounding names. And so we're also dealing with the backlash.
So which actually brings me to a question that I'm kind of struggling with, and I really would like your answers. Lalo, Yasmin, and Armin as well.
Can I give one more? Because you're going to move on to different questions.
No, it's actually close, but yeah.
I just wanted to say also a good analogy to tell these people, because Armin was kind of playing devil advocate for like the liberal left and what should we talk about anti-Muslim bigotry. I would tell them, I think it's always good to draw parallels. That's what I do a lot on my Twitter. And a good parallel here is to ask one of these people, well, do you believe that all Christians have the right to practice their religion as much as they want, as in a secular way, separated from government? They have the right to go to their church and practice and pray to their God if they're Christians. They would tell you probably yes. And then you could ask them, well, how do you feel about fundamentalist Christians who are against gays, against gay marriage, against contraception, promote abstinence-only sex education, believe in creationism, and want it taught in schools? How do you feel about all these people? They hate them and they want to fight against them. Well, I would say exactly how you act towards Christians, that you support their right to pray and practice their religion secularly and peacefully, but you're against their doctrine and their conservatism, and you hate that it gets pushed into government and schools and the gays can't get married and all of that, exactly how you act towards these people, that you can say, okay, practice your religion, but you can't impede on people's civil rights. Just apply that to Islam. That's it.
Just treat all religions
Just
with the same
apply
contempt.
that attitude to Islam, because you're not doing it. That's very obvious these days. They are not holding Muslims to the same standard. And that's why they are partly also bigoted towards Muslims, because they hold them to that lower standard of expectations.
Yeah, that's actually a very good point. And I have something that I'm kind of a bit struggling with, and I think probably all of us are struggling with, is that how can we make our arguments in a sense that we don't get used as quote unquote useful idiots by the far right? Because that's something that I was quoted multiple times by Milo. My posts are being put on the Donald Trump Reddit page. So what can we do? So people use against us the argument is that, this is not the right time for you to speak up because it's gonna further the right wing argument.
Yeah.
What can we do? If there's anything that we can do, Faisal, Lalo, Yasmin, Armin, Ali, what can we do to prevent that our message gets sent from us, not get diluted by people who use us to advance their own
I've been
arguments?
thinking about this a lot. But if Yasmin wants to say something,
No,
so
go ahead. You're the guest. I'll speak after.
So I've been thinking about this a lot. Exactly what your question. It's a good question, Faisal. So I would say that essentially you shouldn't even think about it, really.
That's what I was going to say.
Right. Because here's the problem.
Who cares?
If I put on Twitter, I can put a story, a statistic about, for example, FGM throughout Northern Africa, or I put a statistic about honor killings, or I talk about a stoning in Iran, right? We talk about any of these things. Any of these tweets can and are used by people that I see this. They take these tweets and they say, look at these savages. We have to keep them out of our country and ban the Quran and blah, blah, blah. They do this. Now, how do we prevent that? The only way to prevent that is by not talking about those problems. That's it. That's the only thing you could do. Now, should you do that? Should you stop talking about the problems in Muslim societies about these people? Should you stop talking about FGM? Should you stop talking about honor killing? Should you stop talking about the condition of women in Saudi Arabia? No, you shouldn't. And if these people are going to come and use that, you know what? Those people are just out there. For example, if I criticize Hamas, that could get used to disparage Muslims, right? And it could be used by Zionists to say, see how these Palestinians are, see how the Muslims are, see how the Arabs are. I could equally, the next day, criticize Israel. And it could be used by new Nazis who are anti-Semitic. See how the Jews are, see how terrible Israel is. Both could happen. Should I stop either? No, you have to do both, right? And the second part to that, as far as your question about what do we do about the rights using us, you know what? To some degree, you have to kind of embrace them. For example, Ayaan Hirsi Ali, I put up a video this week of her on Fox News giving commentary about the London attack on Westminster Bridge. I've confused some stuff there. I'm not familiar
you're
with.
right.
Yeah, in
it.
Westminster. And she commented on Fox News. Now, a lot of people, after I posted that, said, why is she on Fox News? Well, she's on Fox News because the left want nothing to do with her. She's not getting invited on MSNBC. She's not getting invited on liberal networks to talk, right? So what do you expect from her? And I think Ayaan is a great example because Ayaan has been doing this for almost 20 years now. She was the first ever famous ex-Muslim I had ever heard of. And she was saying this over 15 years ago, where she was pointing out the problems with Islam. She was an ex-Muslim from Somalia, Black woman who knows the religion well, who's a minority. You can get behind her. She's not a white supremacist or anything. And she was on tons of networks. She was on CNN. She was on MSNBC. She was in Intelligence Squared debate. She was everywhere. She was interviewed everywhere. And what did the left do with her? They threw her away. Not only did they throw away and ignore her, they actively now work against her. She goes to university and the liberal students who are not Muslim, plus the Muslims, say, we don't want you here. Get the fuck out.
They put her on lists.
So when she's invited to Fox News and she might be confirming some of the narrative of some like Trump supporters or people who are bigoted. But what should she do? Because the left is not going to invite her. The left is not going to have them on her show. So it's the right or nothing. It's the right or stay at home. So how can you blame her? I don't think she should stay at home. So if she can get her message out there somehow at this point, and besides, why should she go on MSNBC? Is it more noble than Fox News? I don't like Fox News, but these other networks are inviting Linda Sarsour and treating her, she's a princess narrative, right? Like princess of Islam, and she's a liberal and all this stuff. And look at what she says about Ayan. She said she wants to whip her ass and take away her vagina and impose Sharia law. And they chose her, a woman born in the United States who has never been oppressed by Islam, in a hijab, who's a conservative. They put her on a liberal network, while Ayan was oppressed under Islam, suffered FGM, lived in Africa, was almost in a forced marriage, made her way through the whole world in Denmark, was a part of parliament, very knowledgeable, now a full atheist, believes in science, believes in the Enlightenment, believes in all these liberal values, and they don't want anything to do with her. And only the right to ask her on? Like, what the hell?
Just a correction. She was in the Dutch parliament, not the Denmark. Just quick. It's the Dutch, not the Danish.
Holland, right?
Yeah. It's the Netherlands, not Denmark. But
the Netherlands. Yeah. But so that's what I would say at this point. When they get offended that she's on Fox News, there's no alternative, and two, even if there was, these people are no better. I don't consider the liberal networks. They're beyond repair at this point. Like they're having all these Muslim women with hijab like crazy to tell them that Islam is feminist, Islam is liberal, Islam is the first feminist religion.
Your sexuality.
It privatizes your sexuality, and they applaud them. So, who cares about them at some point, right? It's like they're no better.
That was awesome. I totally enjoyed that. I loved it. That was really good. I can't even remember what I was going to say. What was the question again?
The question is that what can we do to kind of prevent...
Oh, right. If they use our quotes, yeah, I totally agree with what Lalo was saying. I was going to say something along the same lines. Speak your truth, and that's all you can do. You just got to keep speaking the truth, and if it gets quoted here on some website that you don't like, I mean, there's nothing you can do to control that. That's like, scientists, same thing. They're gonna do their research, and their research can be used to support different narratives. It doesn't mean that scientists are going to stop doing research, right? We have to say what we need to say. We have to speak the truth, and
it's not necessarily even something that's bad. Like to even be quoted on a right-wing network. Like some people say, like, why are they on this right-wing network? They shouldn't be. Well, why not? Because I think anything I say, I stand behind, and I think it's a good thing. And if it reaches people who are on the rights, I think that's a good thing. And because it's coming from me, who's a Chilean Palestinian, or if it came from Faisal, who's an Iraqi, and they like me or they like Faisal, they might change their mind a little bit. They might think, well, you know what? Maybe this isn't a race issue. Maybe it's not about their color of skin or that they're an Arab. Maybe it is just an ideological problem, right? So the fact that we reach them can help them also distinguish between them liking us despite our race versus just the ideology, because we also want to create that separation in the right wing. We want them to understand that.
I think it's also fair enough what you said about what makes far left any better than far right. They're both equally deplorable. So if we get quoted in far left, people aren't, well, I mean, that would never happen. But if anybody in the far left ever quoted us, we're not going to get upset about it. But somebody in the far right quotes us, we're going to get upset about it. I don't really care. I don't agree with either of your politics, but I stand behind my quote.
Yeah, Lacey Green and Francesca Ramsey is not going to talk with Yasmin Mohammed. to
No.
talk about how horrible Islam is and how horrible wearing a hijab is. They're not going to talk to her anyway. Right?
right.
And these people are not any better to me than some people on the
Exactly.
far right. So I couldn't care less.
Mm-hmm.
Armin has a comment to make.
You're muted, Armin. Yeah.
Yeah, no. So I think that what I've noticed is that when we post anti-Islam stuff on Atheist Republic, we do attract a lot of right-wing bigots. But what I've noticed is that they are as sensitive and fragile, a lot of them, as the Muslims or also the so-called snowflakes liberals, right? And all you have to do is to shake them off, is just to post a few things that they don't like, and they get so offended and run away. They, even though they accuse others of getting run away, just post something against Trump and see how offended they get. They just think like, oh, this is not what I thought it was, and they just run away. So all you have to do to get rid of these people is just like, you could mention something along the fact that we support Muslims as people. We don't support Islam, but we are against any discrimination. And if you make that clear, they get offended and run away. If you
I think it's easy to control our own social medias, but I think the question was if our quotes get taken and used on their platforms. But in our own social medias, I mean, I know Lalo did the same thing. One time he started to talk about Christianity and his followers lost their shit on him. They're like, you're only supposed to be talking about Islam.
certain followers, the one who were kind of like Christian apologists. But to mention a little bit what Armin is saying, I don't think you don't necessarily have to actively try to lose these people. You just have to be honest. Yes. Yasmin was saying, I posted something about Christianity. I didn't do it on purpose to lose these people. That's just how I feel. And the ones who can't stick around and see it don't have to. But the thing is, I don't think you even have to necessarily try and lose people who are following you on the right, because the people on the left, they suck too. And if I tried actively to lose people on the left and the right who are kind of social justice and Trump supporters, I'd have like 1,000 followers, right? I don't have to try and lose everybody.
The harder you try to get rid of people, the more people will come follow you. There's a little
truth to that, yeah.
Yeah, because when we start posting anti-Trump stuff, we get a lot of liberals, and then we post Muslim stuff. It's actually the more noise you make, the more people start following you. So,
but Armin, this is my point though. You're saying that if you post anti-Trump stuff, you'll get liberals, but then you run into another problem. Then when you start posting anti-Islam stuff, those liberals are also gonna get pissed at you. Right. So and those people are better.
So you can never make everybody happy. So just make yourself happy and speak your truth.
Exactly.
No, but then that's what I'm saying. You just keep pissing all of them off, and you're good.
Which is actually partially what I'm trying to do. So I'm gonna be. I mean, that's kind of a policy that I'm following quite recently. It's not like as organized as I think it's gonna sound like, but. So I posted this like long satire article of like a conversation between a jihadist and a regressive leftist, and that was shared by Glenn Beck, who probably some of you may know is kind of a Christian right winger, and as a result of that, I got probably 20,000 likes from Christian right wingers, and I by non-intentionally the next post after I made the fun of the regressive left, I was making fun of Christianity. And they're like, screw you, sad nigger, go back to your country, you suck, you're a terrorist, blah, blah. So, and now after the elections and Trump winning and stuff, and I'm seeing every time I make a post about Islam, I see my comment section is being not filled, but I see many people with Pepe the Frog and all of these alt-right stuff, to the way that I am now actually trying to kick them out, because they're making this comment feed to be cancer. Now,
Faisal,
I see some of the comment feed is all kill the Muslims. I see comments like this on my wall now, and it's making me uncomfortable. This is if you don't know who I am, okay, and then you look at my page, and then you see the most comment is kill the Muslims. What do you think about me? This is not the type of following I would like to have. This is not the type of people Like, I want them to be my main supporters. Like, screw that.
Just post anti-Trump stuff.
I
and they
do.
will just run away.
I do. Like, the most like comment is "Go back to your country." Like, what the fuck? Like, no.
But Faisal, you've told me this story before, and I've thought about it, and I think there's an aspect to it that you should consider as well. Is that when Glenn Beck shared that post, and you got a lot of people on the right to suddenly follow you. Yes, when they saw that you're just an atheist and you're also going to trash the Christian right and the far right and all that, and then a percentage of that group that you got from Glenn Beck attacked you, yeah, like there's some people in there who are really crazy and they stand out a lot. But I bet you that there was some people in there who were right wing, who weren't that crazy, who probably still follow you today.
Yeah. I mean, I assume some of them are good people. I'm not.
You assume some of them are good people. But here's the thing, like. In any group, like whether it's if you get a ton of followers from the left, you're going to get social justice warriors in there too, who are also going to call you an anti-Muslim, Islamophobe, racist, all that crap too. You're going to get that kind of thing as well. But some of them you can assume are good people, right? But also on the right is the same thing. So, but it's just, they stand out more, right? The bigots, when we see their comments online and when they start invading, they stand out more than anyone. But you have to think about the quiet ones are the people you should care about as well. And there's plenty of good people on the right who are even maybe Trump supporters who are going to talk to you very rationally. One of the first podcasts I did was with Khalid Baroui, who is a guy who's an ex-Muslim guy from Morocco, immigrated to the United States, became a citizen, and he's a Trump supporter, right? And he's mostly liberal, I'd say. He's not very conservative, but he supports Trump all the same. And there's people like him out there.
And there's people on the left like that too that are actually good people, but they're just dumb. They don't understand the difference between an ideology and a people. They just want to jump to defend the minority.
Yeah, but like I reached a scary moment. Like that was a scary moment. So I made this like interview with Dave Rubin, and they're like, I posted on my page, and then the comment that says "Go back to your country" get 200 likes. As like the most liked comment on my page. I was
I hate them all, Faisal. I want to go punch all of those Nazis.
Like the fact that like I have like such a significant following that get triggered the way that the most like post is like "Go back to your country." It was like kind of a scary, kind of a wake up call. Like, what the hell? Did I just created a monster that I'm now trying to.
Yeah, well, but the thing is also the zealots are the most active, right? They're the ones who comment the most, they're the one who do the most likes, the one who leave the most comments and all of that. But I mean, that's just the thing. Your following is getting very big, right? And anytime your following gets very big, you're going to attract a lot of people who are on the extremes, far right, far left, and all the people in the center. And you have to deal with them in different ways. But you shouldn't be discouraged by it, right? It's just you're attracting different mentality.
My idea is that should we actually like discourage it or try to like
just be honest.
Like
just be honest, Faisal. No, just don't just be honest. Like Yasmin was saying, like one day I just got into an argument about Christianity and it lasted like a week where people got angry at me and unfollowed. And then, sometimes it was a Trump supporter, sometimes I was some social justice wars get mad at me for a week, but it's based on what's going on in the news. It's just me giving an honest comment, and you just have to deal with it at the moment. But just be honest, Faisal. I don't think you have to actively we have to get rid of the Trump supporters or something. No. They'll come.
But
they'll see what's up. They'll get to know you.
Didn't you coin the term Trump justice warrior?
I did.
Wonderful job,
TJWs.
Wonderful job.
I coined Trump justice wars because I like Armin was saying, they are just as delicate as the social justice warriors, and so I coined that, and a lot of people said it's not going to catch on, but a lot of people have liked it.
That's wonderful. I love it.
Actually, they call Trump their God Emperor, right? So because they call him God Emperor, I'm like, okay, this is a religion, so it's fair game on an atheist page now. Because
Milo called him daddy, remember?
Yeah, I know.
That was creepy.
How do you, I don't know how many time we have left, but how do you explain atheist ex-Muslim support for Trump? Like someone like Asla Romani. I mean, she's not an ex-Muslim, but
Or like Khalid that you just
Yeah,
mentioned.
I think it's I spoke a lot with Khalid, and I've spoken a lot with some ex-Muslims who support Trump, and to me it makes perfect sense. I think it's that Khalid or other people. Let me put it this way: a lot of ex-Muslims leave the Middle East to not be surrounded by Muslims. That's the whole point, right? And if you asked these ex-Muslims, or even you guys, I could ask this to you: would you guys want to live around 5,000 or 10,000 Muslims who know who you are and what you do online?
Absolutely not.
You probably would say, hell
I
no,
think
and
for
you'd
me it's
probably
gonna
run
be
for your
depends,
life.
right? It depends what type of Muslims. But I mean, if you're gonna say like, if I'm gonna be
If you have
surrounded,
5,000 to 10,000, Faisal, there's going to be a percentage of those that want you dead.
If it's
So
1% of
even if
10,000,
it's-
yeah.
Yeah.
yeah, but like,
Yeah,
I mean, if
it-
it's like 100,000 Majid Nawaz, I would not have an issue with that.
Yeah, find 100 Majid
Okay,
Nawaz
but
in any
that's-
country in the world.
That's
though.
not realistic.
Yeah, that's not realistic. No,
There's
if you,
not 100,000
and plus
Majid Nawazes on the
we're
planet.
specifically talking about Muslims who they are importing from certain Muslim countries. And I understand that for Ashra Nomani or Khalid, a lot of these people, their main
Asra's
subject.
still a Muslim, though. So just to clarify,
Right, yeah, so
Khalid is ex.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
but Ashra has a very good understanding of the problems of Islam, despite her saying she's still a Muslim. She recognizes the issues, right? And so I would say to them, their main issue is Islam and the problem of Muslim conservatism. Now, I don't support Trump still because that's not my main issue among politics. I take in economics and healthcare and a bunch of other issues,
Climate.
and I put that all together, and I wouldn't support him. But I understand that when you've lived that life, and Ashra Nomani lost, like she knew a journalist in Pakistan who got beheaded, from what I remember. And when you've lived that kind of life, and you hear people on the left, these Democrats who refuse to even say radical Islam because they feel it's going to hurt some people's feelings, I can understand their position that they just get, you know what, I'm so fucking sick of it. I'm sick of it. I want somebody at least to acknowledge this as a problem. That's all I want. And so just to finish, like I understand them at least on that level. I don't agree with them because I put more issues together when I think about who I would vote for, but I empathize with their life and their prioritization, right? Khalid is an open atheist. He was nice enough to come on my podcast saying he's an atheist, give his name and his face. Does he want to live around 10,000 Muslims? I would guess hell no. And can I blame him for saying, I don't want a president who's going to import, millions of Muslims? I can't say you're a bigot or you're wrong for even feeling that, right? I can't say that to him.
Yeah, but just to be clear,
Right?
I mean, I don't think anyone wants to import millions of Muslims, including Obama. But yeah, I mean,
I would agree with you, Faisal. That's
He-
why
he
I
is
wouldn't vote for him.
Yeah.
Right? I totally agree with you. But
Okay, another thing about those ex-Muslims, even if this was the single issue, if the Muslims coming in or the Islam was, I would still tell them that they're wrong to support Trump because they're missing the point, the battle here. The battle that we're fighting is not an immigration fight; it's an ideological fight. Even the best, even the tallest walls are not going to stop ideas from traveling. Right? A lot of the problems that we have, even if Muslims don't come here, their ideas can come here through social media. And another thing is that even if their ideas were not coming here, it's very selfish because the problem with, you can't just create a bubble and think like you're safe. The world is changing, right? And even if they're not coming to us, we have to go to them because the only thing you could do with walls is delay the problem. But this is an idea that is spreading and is growing, and sooner or later, it's going to affect you, no matter how tall your walls are. And we have to win this battle ideologically. And if you focus on borders, and if you focus on immigration, you're missing the fight. You're missing the real fight. And if you give this fight to bigots, you actually are you're actually losing the ideological battle. You're actually giving the other side the weapons they need to win, right? You're making our job harder. You're making, we are trying to take over the anti-Islam arguments, but nobody is giving it to us, and they're giving it to the freaking bigots. And by giving it to the bigots, you're making the Islamist views more popular, and they are for them it's easier now to sell their ideas because to their followers when you give the anti-Islam battle to the bigots. So even if the Islam issue was your main point, you have given the anti-Islam weapons to the wrong people by supporting Trump.
Right, but just to clarify, like I want to emphasize, like even on the issue of Muslim immigration, refugees, or Islam, I also don't think that Trump is the solution. I wouldn't agree with them on that. However, just to like say, I was trying to respond to Faisal's point as like, how do you explain these people? Like, why do these people support Trump? I try to at least sympathize. I'll change it to sympathy. Empathize. I empathize that at least they have real concerns. Like, it's the same thing. Like, I saw on CNN interviews with people who live on bordering cities with Mexico, and they were supportive of Trump because they have serious issues with immigration, more than you'll find than a person who lives in New York, obviously, or in Michigan or in Boston. Like, their problems is not the same as everyone else's. So all they care about at that moment is border control with Mexico. That's all. That's their number one main issue. And so I understand with ex-Muslims or liberal Muslims who see Islam as the main issue because of the lives they've led. I at least don't just cut them away and say, hey, you're just a bigot and you're supporting a bigot. No, I try to understand that this is a major issue for them that they feel needs to be addressed somehow, right? And then from there, when I treat them as a human being who isn't stupid, then I start to can talk to them like and give the points that Armin just gave, right? But we can't just throw bigot, you're supporting white supremacist and toss them away.
I mean, I probably can say that they are, I mean, as again, like we can separate people and ideas. I mean, I can think that there are people, human beings, who make stupid choices. So like, I mean, and I kind of agree with Armin that I think that they have made our job much more difficult. I mean, I think, not to lose any of I mean, I met Asra Romani just 2 days ago. I'm not, I consider her still a friend and stuff, but I think that, I mean, the best thing Islamists can have right now is the fact that they have Trump. Like Trump.
Okay, I'm sorry. Can I just interject for a moment here and say, what were their choices? Hillary? Like, it's not like they had some great choices to choose from and then they chose the shitty guy. They were both shitty guys. Hillary would have continued to support the Muslim Brotherhood in the same way that Obama did. And it was honestly, I think, I don't know what I would do if I was American, to be honest.
I mean, I agree with you. I mean, it was definitely a tough choice and it was not easy. Like Hillary was not an easy sell. But I mean, I'm not here trying to, I mean, the elections are gone and fortunately Trump is the president right now. But I mean, that's something for us kind of, I mean, it's kind of a discussion to be had.
They had a hard decision to make.
Because that's the thing is that I am very afraid that after Trump winning and it's just going to be like a war between literally the far right versus Islamism. Like that's going to be the battle. And you have to pick a side. And we're going to be forced to pick a side. And unfortunately, we might have to choose the far right. But I just don't want it to reach that level. I don't want it to be a level in which I say Trump will bring the final solution, pun intended. Is that like I don't want to have a choice between the Crusaders versus the Islamic expansionists. Like I don't want to be forced to this choice, and I don't want to be feed in to actually both of the cycles of far right and Islamists. Like that's, I think, I mean, I don't know what is the solution to this. I mean, I that's what I'm asking.
Two things. First of all, you're talking as if the far left are good and the far right are bad.
No, I never said that.
I think they're both shit piles.
I mean, I shit on the left as much as you do.
Yeah. And my second point is, I can't remember which podcast it was, but Ali made a really good analogy that's always stuck in my head. And it's to Lalo's point of empathizing. And he was talking about if you have your house is on fire and people around you are like, there's no fire. What are you talking about? 99.9% of this house isn't on fire. Or there's other people that are like, oh, look at the beauty of this fire. Let's put a Nike swoosh on it. Right? Like, they're not getting it. And then you have Donald Trump and he opens a door. Like, you don't like Donald Trump. You don't trust him. You don't know where this door is going to lead, but it's an open door. So you're going to go through that door when at least it's something. So I also do empathize with people that voted for him. And
yeah, but
I don't know. I just wanted to bring up that analogy. I thought it was a good one.
What if that choice is going to bring the end of the planet? I mean, that's kind of, that's what I'm kind of.
Everything's going to bring the end of the planet. Like, again, far left are not any better than the far right. Like far, when you had Hillary and Obama talking about 99.9% of Muslims are good people and we don't have a problem with them and none of this has anything to do with Islam and let's continue to give billions of dollars to the Muslim Brotherhood, that's a fucking problem. Like, that's not any better. I don't know if it's any better or any worse, but they're both piles of shit. It might be different, degrees of shit, but it's still, one is not any better than the other. It's not like we had any good choices there.
So personally, I think the best argument in favor of Trump is how horrible Hillary was. That's one of the best arguments I always hear is just like, as much as bad things you can say about Trump, when you just you say the alternative is Hillary.
He didn't take $25 million from Saudi Arabia.
That's a great argument in favor of Trump.
Hillary is still morally better, but I'm not here to defend her.
Well, me too, Faisal. Like, at the end of the day, you and me agree. Like, I still think Trump is the worst there is. And because I specialized when I studied international relations, I did my thesis on nuclear proliferation, and I know quite a bit about that. And because I know a lot about that, it makes me very nervous that Trump has his hands on the button of the largest nuclear arsenal in the world. That really freaks me out, especially if you know the protocols of how nuclear war starts and how it's engaged. That really freaks me out because I know that because most people don't know how that works, and I do. And I'm sure anyone who does, and I know a lot of experts who have commented on, there's videos of them I could show, they're very nervous about it as well.
Yeah, so that actually brings me to probably the last question. I don't know how much time we have, probably the last question. Armin probably can jump in after this, is that how much we should sacrifice to actually get rid of Islamic extremism.
Oh, that's what I was going to say. So, Faisal, you know what? I would say this. Don't even worry that much about Trump. You know why? You're an ex-Muslim. We're atheists who criticize Islam. We're not making policy. We don't like.
Well, I'm kind of involved at a higher level than being ex-Muslim, but yeah.
Well, I'm saying this is a larger message to atheists who criticize Islam, whether you're an ex-Muslim or not. We're not getting any kind of platform, least of all to have any real push in policy. The left wants nothing to do with critics of Islam, and the right also is like, it's a totally different story. Like nobody loves us, right? Yeah, nobody loves ex-Muslims, and nobody loves atheists, right? Atheists who criticize Christianity and the far right, and we criticize Islam. Who loves me? Nobody loves me, right? It's just like 1,000.
I love you, Lalo.
You love me, and a few thousand people love me online on Twitter, but it's not a lot, right? We don't have this huge tug. So honestly, I have opinions about Trump, and I think we all do, but I wouldn't hugely stress out like, we have to make this our war. We just have to get somebody's attention somehow. We have to change the mind of the right a little bit and the minds of the left a little bit about how they view Islam. And we have to start from there, because we're not making huge rallies like that are drawing in millions of people. It's not going to happen.
I disagree. I think I'm stressed about this a lot because so when I was saying bigots, I wasn't saying that all Trump supporters are all bigots, but I think that these people gave basically handed over this anti-Islam movement to the bigots. And I think that what Faisal is suggesting is that our job is actually much harder. Yes, nobody gave us much love, but I think we had we had a chance. We were gaining some traction, maybe not a lot, but now it's so much harder, because when you have Trump and anti-Muslims, not anti-Islam, anti-Muslims so popularized and so out there and doing the things that they're doing, we are going to get grouped in with them. And selling our anti-Islam ideas without getting it grouped in with anti-Muslim ideas is now much more difficult.
Do you want to get grouped in with pro-Muslim people, like the ones who celebrate the hijab? I don't want to get grouped in with them either.
No,
yeah, I don't like any of, like, these two groups are terrible to me.
I understand that, but both of them, I don't want to get grouped with any of them, right? But I'm saying right now, the confusion is much more. And getting in mixed with these people is much easier. And selling the idea of we're anti-Islam, but not anti-people is getting more and more difficult. And it's turning into what Faisal is saying, that the right versus Islam, and us trying to come here and provide some nuance is becoming a little bit more drowned in the noise. But I'm not saying that we were loved before, but I'm saying that we were getting somewhere. But now it's harder because everybody wants to make sure that they're not being counted as bigot. That was before the case, but now even more people are even more sensitive about that than it was before.
Yeah, I agree. It's the whole calling people Islamophobic or racist for criticizing Islam is only getting worse every day. It's not getting better. There's more celebration of the hijab every week. Some company has a new hijabi spokesman, Nike, Playboy, makeup company.
To end this on a positive note, what is next for us? What should we do? What other projects that Lalo is trying to promote? Tell us more. Like what do you think? What we can do to like end this polarization, make the world a better place?
Well, I think for now, I'm just trying to get my podcast off the ground. It's been going well. I'm treating my podcast almost like an education for myself and through proxy my audience, because I'm learning so much from the people I have on. And I think that is the future. I think the future is all these people from different countries. It doesn't necessarily even have to be Islam, but they're a great example. It could be because, like, for example, I interviewed somebody from Cuba because there was tons of people on the left celebrating Fidel Castro, even Justin Trudeau.
Yeah.
Right? He celebrated Castro as some great leader. Right? So the left is confused on a lot of things, not just Islam. And the best thing we can do as a person who's lived in multiple countries, in 3 different continents, I think the best thing you can do is talk to people from all over the world who can tell you amazing stories, right? And I think partially is the 3 of you with great backgrounds discussing issues very in depth for people. And
he's just gone now, but he's also...
Mossad found Ali and they kidnapped him. They took his shoes with him. But I think, you guys having on amazing people, me doing something similar, and a lot of people doing that kind of thing. One thing I learned is a lot of these people, they want to tell their stories and they don't have a platform. And then sometimes I think to myself, why the hell is this girl with this incredible story that could be like an epic movie, Oscar winner from Saudi Arabia? Why is she talking to little old Lalo with his small podcast? Because nobody else wants to talk to her, but they want to tell their stories. Right? So I think the best thing we can do is give these people a platform and a voice. Mm-hmm. And that's at least what I'll try to do on my podcast. And I think you guys are doing something very similar. So I think
that's how I actually think about Yasmin, by the way. I think that this incredible woman deserves to be heard as much as possible. And
Shukran,
I saw her first. Back off, Faisal.
No, go back. Go back. Go back to your country.
Damn it.
Faisal's first.
Yeah, so like I'm
on
glad
Facebook,
to do my
he's
part.
always first.
And I think the more we get these people platform, and I mean I'm very lucky. I mean I think one of the best things I'm good at is social media and telling jokes. And like I'm able to get like 90,000 followers on my Facebook in a year. Like and like people like some people like what I do, and like the best thing I can do is just give as many people a platform and get them more likes. And maybe this could be our platform. Maybe we don't need the mainstream media. Maybe we can create our own media and
we create our own media. Yeah.
It is the future. It is the future.
And Armin is always referring to an ex-Muslim movement when he's when he is comparing like the reform movement versus the ex-Muslim movement. And there really isn't an ex-Muslim movement, but I think we're the ex-Muslim movement.
Yes, we can.
I think we could do something like that. Like you were talking about the hashtag ex-Muslim because
yes,
we could do something like that. I don't know what exactly, but I don't want it to be just ex-Muslims because I feel like people already see us as a monolith. And so when we're Muslims, we're a monolith, when we're ex-Muslims, we're a monolith.
You guys have to remember, atheists love you. Atheists somebody tweets out a video of an ex-Muslim telling their amazing story, and it gets hundreds, if not thousands, of retweets. And those people are atheists in the West. They want to hear these stories.
Maybe something like ex-Muslim supporter or something like that. I mean, I want to make sure that we include the whole community, that it's not just.
But yeah, like ex-Muslims is a small group. They're sometimes they have to be in hiding. So it's not, I don't know if you guys are enough to just be a movement on your own, but basically you're atheists, that's, you're a subdivision of atheists, but you're atheists. And we have to build a wider bridge. I know it's like Dawkins has said, bringing atheists together on a project is like herding cats. But I think in this atmosphere where everything's so polarized with the far left and the far right, I think we might be obligated to bring ourselves together. Mm-hmm. And I think new media is gonna play a role in that with the podcasts and Twitter and Facebook. I think it's more possible every day.
And actually, can we give more credit to some other ex-Muslim groups like the ex-Muslims of North America, the Council of Ex-Muslims of Great Britain, ex-Muslimish, Faith to Faithless?
No, it's not ex-Muslimish. It's just Muslimish.
Oh, Muslimish. Did I miss anything? Because
the secular.
No, but those groups are all really important groups. Yeah. Those groups are very important groups for supporting each other, like for closeted ex-Muslims. They're not really doing like counter dawah. That's what we want to do, right? Like we want to be, when you talk about the ex-Muslim movement, we're the only ones that are doing that, or we could do that. That could
I talked to Yasmin about this at one point. I said, a lot of those groups are kind of like Alcoholics Anonymous. Like you show up and you don't even want other people showing up there. It's just among ex-Muslims. And I understand, like, that's not a bad thing. Yeah. A lot of these people need support. However, aside from that, like Armin, you've talked about this. Yasmin has talked about this. There also has to be an open outside for the public movement of ex-Muslims that goes beyond just like a support group. Yes, for the public to see you. And a lot of the public does want to see that, and it helps.
Just to be clear, we're not discounting what they're doing. They are providing.
No, it's great what they're doing. Yeah, these people need a lot of help.
100%.
A lot of the ex-Muslim women I've talked to who have left the Middle East, if not almost all of them, to suffer from PTSD. And a lot of these people need a lot of support.
PTSD. It's been 15, almost 20 years.
Well, if you hear like podcasts with your story, nobody would be surprised by that. But yeah, no, a lot like ex-Muslims need private conversations where they can talk about how they suffered and the traumas they have. Yeah. But outside of that, there has to be also a public movement. And by being ex-Muslims who are critical of Islam, you also humanize the criticism of Islam, right? You show people physically that Islam is not a race by saying, I'm an ex-Muslim, I'm of that, I'm Arab or Persian or Palestinian, whatever it is, right? Pakistani, Indian, Indonesian, whatever. But you say, I also don't believe in this ideology. For the same reason you guys don't like the conservative Christian right, I don't like my Muslim conservative right. We have that in common, right? And you guys are sometimes the best ones to physically show that.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome.
That was a great ending.
That was great. Yeah, that's a really good conclusion to our podcast, I think. Well said, Lalo.
Well said.
Big hug, guys. Big hug.
Group hug.
Allahu Akbar.
Oh, you ruined it.
You ruined it.
It's Lalo Akbar.
Lalo Akbar.
Yeah, Lalo Akbar.
So that brings us to the end of our podcast. Thank you so much, Lalo, for your time and being with us. We would love to, maybe you can be a regular guest on our podcast.
Anytime.
And,
I love
we
you
can
guys.
discuss
We could do this for hours.
These issues more and more. I think there are going to be more issues coming up and more discussions. Armin is asking me to ask people. So for my people who pledged allegiance to the secular caliphate and those who don't, or have not yet, to leave us a review on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, whatever app that you're using to listen to us, and maybe on Google Hangouts. I think it's going to be on YouTube. So if you're going to leave a positive comment there, or you like our video or share our video, that will be wonderful. And if you have money, that will be great. And you can send us a donation to patreon.com/SJME, or you can just search Secular Justice from the Middle East on Patreon, and we're going to show up to you. This is your host, Faisal Saeed Al-Mutar. Thank you so much, and have a great night.
And none of us matter. It's only Faisal. It's the Faisal Show.
It's the Secular Caliphate.
That's right.
And
we're your fearless
Emirs. You are the
followers.
Emirs and Emiras. Okay, good night, everyone. God bless.
Good night,
Bye.
everyone.
Good night.
Bye.
The secular jihadists have been made possible thanks to the gracious support of the Illuminati and the great state of Israel. That's what we have been told, but we haven't received our checks yet. In the meantime, we greatly appreciate the support of our current donors. Please consider supporting by sharing the podcast with your fellow heathens or by donating at patreon.com/SJME.